feel like there's details you would want to see?
Well, there were some that were missing, but I didn't make notes on,
Oh, okay.
so, yeah, in any case.
Is there a way to go back and look at more of the details?
Well, you
I don't know how we're proceeding
Yeah. In any case, what's here? Make a motion and approve.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
On the naysayer.
Yes. Well, you're not a naysayer, you abstained,
Okay,
you weren't here.
topics from the floor, but things that are not on the agenda tonight. Who's out there with?
No microphone.
It's all,
It's everywhere.
All right.
You just talk and it picks you up.
Fantastic. Ganika Peterson, 101 St. Helens Street. And I came here on the behalf of Columbia County Habitat for Humanity. I'm one of their boards of directors. And right now I'm working on a project that is a series of public forum on the housing instability and homelessness in rural community. And the forum's going to be in 3 cities in Columbia County, starting in St. Helens and then Vernonia and Clascanai. And the way we came up with the idea, it actually started about last year when we have the broken ground ceremony for our nudist home on 7th Street. And the television KGW came out and did the piece on that. And so that night they have about 3 minutes, about the story, but front half of it, they interviewed people at the event. And the second half, they talk about their homeless crisis, and then they switch their picture to people pushing carts, sleep on the sidewalk of Portland Street. And we're happy that we got coverage for our ceremony, but we all feel that that is actually not the picture of homelessness in rural community. And with that, we have an idea that maybe we should be the one who tell the story instead of have somebody else tell our story. So with that, we wrote a grant to Oregon Humanity, want to have a conversation project on this particular issue. So fast forward, we didn't get the grant. However, before we didn't get the grant, we already start legwork by talking to different organizations who work on this issue. And everybody just jumped on board and became our partner and support us. And the latest one that jumped on board is the City of St. Helens. Last week, the City Council approved to support the project and offer financial support of $750. So why I'm here today is that I think part of talking or find solution on this issue, part of it is related to planning. I read through your housing need analysis that you did last year, and I understand that you all probably has understand about the land that is available, land use issue on this topic. However, I believe that in order to fix the issue of housing instability and homelessness, is really need an effort from everybody. Not only the government, but also public, private organization and nonprofit organization get together and talk about it. And there would be folks who really motivated by it and care about it and want to do something about it. So The way we're going to set up or organize this event is that we're going to have a panelist. And the panelists there, the concept of panelists is the panelist is not there to make a presentation, but rather there to listen, to learn, and discuss with people about what you know and what's going on. So we planned at the event, we plan to have 4 to 5 people on the panel. The event in St. Helens that I plan to invite you to, we have Senator Johnson is one of the panel. We have Commissioner Margaret Magruder. We talk about the state level, county level. In the city level, I would like to have one of you or more of you who really want to talk about this issue to show up and be able to discuss to people about what's going on at the city level. We would have, we're probably going to have the director of community action team there. More than likely, it's going to be one person from Habitat for Humanity, probably going to be our director there. And with that, I'm going to just give you the draft of what's going on. So this is the date. It's on Thursday night, May 7th. There. And you can see all the logo at the bottom. That is our partner. And I don't know if you remember or not, but I have served as the art commission for City of St. Helens for a long time. And swear to God, trying to raise funds for art project, it's like pulling teeth. This one is so easy. It's just you talk to people and everybody willing to jump on board. So far, whoever I talk to, everybody say yes and volunteer to help. I think that is a sign to show that community really want to talk about it. So anyway, with that, I just would like to invite you to be there. It's Thursday night from 6 to 8. The first an hour and a half is going to be conversation, back and forth. And I'm going to try to get folks from business community, veterans, people who affected by housing crisis to be there to tell their story. And we're going to feed people. The last 30 minutes is going to be more like a socializing. There will be table from organization, local bank, community action team, hopefully United Way, and CCMH and so on. They have table around. So folks who don't want to talk about their issue and want to discuss to somebody else privately, they can connect with those people at the table and be able to maybe get the information or make appointment to talk about those organizations and learn more about programs that can help them with their issue. That's pretty much it.
Great, thanks very much. Mike? Speak. All right, we have the Vaggett Building renovations, Matt Brown.
Hey, Christina, on the Creston pad, can you hit the solstice button? It's the little iPad to your right. There's a button that says solstice at the top.
I'll just do a primer. Last meeting, we brought up some improvements that started on the Bennett Building. That's the historic name of it. This is the building where our utility billing and courts is at. This is in the Riverfront District, which has architectural review standards for buildings that are not official historic landmarks. And some work was started ahead of some of the process. We talked about it a little bit at our last meeting, and I think Chairman Hubbard suggested that the person managing it come talk about it. And so Matt Brown is here, and since then, the design has been evolved a little bit, but I'll let Matt take it from there.
So first, just want to apologize for not wearing shoes. I stepped in dog crap on the lovely plaza out there, and my treads were pretty deep, and I could not get all the way out of the sink. So
Thank you so much for your
if I can smell it, it's pretty bad. So I apologize. Luckily, I wore good socks today.
The story makes it all worth it.
It does. I have three. If you guys, you kind of got pictures.
I got ones, yeah.
So I can pass kind of four of these around. And you guys probably want and pass that around. It'll also be on the slides here. So like Jacob gave me a little introduction. My name is Matt Brown. I'm the Assistant City Administrator here. And so I'm going to go through just a few slides with you, and then I will be happy to answer any questions or anything from the audience or you as members, commission members have for the project. So I wanted to show you a quick peek inside. I'm not sure if any of you have recently been in the building before it was renovated. You would remember about half of this was walled off. There was also a front counter with a plastic partition with a little hole that you used to speak through for customers. Obviously, that was not the best decision, but was made up that time back then. But since then, we've changed a lot of processes, changed a lot of staff. We eventually took that glass out, so it was just the front counter. And then we started talking about renovations inside the office of what needed to happen, what would be the best for some of the business processes, and some of the office space. So as you can see, we've opened up the entire building on this side and installed a front counter that is very similar to the counter that is out front in our city hall. So this is a picture from the other side, still keeping some of the historic colors, same colors that you see in the city hall landscaping, painting the walls, and then the duct work that was done as well. And then one of the big pictures that I think is going to be a topic here is the windows. If you remember at all, the building before we started renovations had a drop ceiling. And that drop ceiling came below those windows. So the windows actually were not actually ever used, so to speak. And that drop ceiling came right above where the top of the bottom window is and went all the way back. So when we removed that drop ceiling, we saw how much space was open. As I'm sure many of you know, when you get into a renovation project, you never quite know what you're going to run into, and this is one of those happy accidents. When we tear out the ceiling that we were going to redo, we thought, God, this is such a great height. We talked about redoing some of the HVAC, and you can see a little bit of it in that picture. And then how great would it be to actually use some of the windows and the view that is basically St. Helens, of that river and the great sunlight that we had today. So this is the current state of the building right now, and I know one of the biggest critiques of this building is the white windows that you see. And what I'm going to show you in the next few slides is that is not the finished product. What you're seeing is this is what has been ordered and what was approved in our budget to do now. In the budget for next year is actually replacement of the windows below with the same, it's not vinyl, but fiberglass windows that are put in place of that. So this was the first rendering that we kind of went through with an architecture firm in Portland. And it kind of got there a little bit, but there were some differences. You'll notice in this drawing, the recess for the entrance is taken out. There's 4 panes of windows instead of the original 3. So there's a few little bit things that we gave this to Jacob and Jenny to kind of go through and remark up about, what needs to be changed, where are we as far as what the architectural standards are in the historic district, as far as trying to keep as true natures to the building, the architecture that was created in the beginning. So this is after Jacob and Jenny kind of had a quick whack at it and made some notes for the architects to change. And this is the final rendering as it stands today. Now, this is obviously just a rendering, and what may actually happen could potentially change. And as we get further into the process, we'll definitely have more discussions with staff and elicit feedback of, what kind of tiles, what color tiles should we use. We talked about doing more of a brown. We've talked about doing more of a dark gray and black. We've talked about doing a red that is similar to the building of the real estate that they used on the bottom side. So there's still a lot of discussion about things, as well as the funding mechanisms for doing this. This is coming out of our general fund operating reserves. So we're trying to do as much as we can to increase the space inside as well as the facade outside to make it more appealing to people. As you can probably tell, walking up to this every day, it's not the greatest sight to see right on the waterfront, as we have so many events that are down here and people walking around. So once we get to this fact and this kind of idea and vision, that is what we have planned for the future as of right now. So I'm happy, that's the end of my slideshow, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And even if you feel like it, we could go take a field trip and you could see inside. That's right next door if you want.
Inside isn't the question, the smoke screen that you presented is the question. Why would you spend the money on vinyl windows when you have an example across the street of what should have gone in the first place?
So first off, they're not vinyl, they're fiberglass.
Whatever they are,
They're meant-
in white.
They're meant to be painted. That, as I'm showing you, is the plan to paint them. However,
They could have told you where to order historically correct windows for that.
so the windows that were ordered was done by our Public Works maintenance person.
Now you're passing the buck again.
I'm not passing the buck, ma'am. If you want me to present and give some options with you, I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think the historic
Ma'am,
committee-
but if you're gonna let me speak and present my case and answer the questions the best of my ability, I'm happy to do that. But if you're not gonna allow me that, I'm happy to leave.
You hired an architect before you started work?
It was in the midst of just beginning this project with the idea. We did not get these drawings really finalized even until really this afternoon and today. So we had an idea and a vision of what it was going to look at the top. Obviously, we're not replacing. We tried to keep the same kind of window pane structure that was in the original pictures that you've seen. And I think that we've accomplished that as far as trying to keep as much as the original architecture as we could, and along with staying within our budget. I understand that the property across the street is a great example of historic preservation and the time and effort and money that went into that building. Unfortunately, you do not have a set standard of what is required for those buildings. You have a best guidelines, do what you can as best to your ability, but you cannot, even as a homeowner or something in this area, you can't punish me for somebody going way above and beyond what is required per code and per your guidelines. And so I think with that in mind, that is what we have tried to do with the building next door with the funds that we have available at this time. We try and preserve as much as we can to keep the original historic value that is in that building.
We don't mean to punish you, it's just all fingers are pointing at whose project is this, to you.
Correct.
And
Like I said, I'm happy to come here and
you're on the
answer.
job, you're called the contractor, and I know how that feels, it's not good sometimes. Also, you said you hired an architect. Well, they provide you a scope of work, and
We only hired an architect to do these drawings, specifically when the issues were brought up here, because having a picture of what we have in mind with internally, obviously having a picture to show people, because I understand that the white windows do not make the greatest outlook, and currently that's what they are. That is not what they will be in the very near future, but I need something to at least show you guys what that vision may be in the near future. So that was the point of having them, getting an architecture to do these drawings.
Now,
What I want to know is why didn't you come to us first?
this is what you missed last meeting. The cart got before the horse, is basically what happened. And because normally, okay, we got this building permit, it's a change, we know it's not an historic building, so it's a recommendation from the Historic Landmarks Committee in regards to how the building complies with the architectural design guidelines. We've done it many times. Ideally, this stuff would have been done less than 4 hours ago, or more than 4 hours ago. And we could have done that process. But since we did had it, the idea was, well, we should at least show you how this has evolved, and we'll still bring it before you in a formal setting to be able to evaluate it like we normally do. But we wanted to update you on the progress since what happened last month.
Why is this not a considered a historic building?
Because in the 1980s, when they determined most of them, they didn't put it on the list. We would have to.
Yeah, but not on the list. When I brought it up with someone I eat with every week, she's going back like 80 years of what that building was from the day it was built. It's a historic building. So it should have been on the list. The list was done in 85, right?
Yeah, it's an old list, yeah.
Yeah, it was goal 5 or something like that we were working on. And I don't recall why it wasn't put there, but I think it was assumed that the downtown area as a whole was historic. So I don't know that it was listed individually.
It wasn't, and it was never an official designated landmark.
Well, let's do a designation like we did for the Feather property.
So I went by and looked at the building before I came in here and stopped and talked to Matt about it a little bit. The problem I saw is that the materials looked cheap. The glass windows were great, but when you look at the area up above the main big windows, it looks like it's real cheap vinyl that's gonna blister in the sun and be gone in 5 years or less. It's not his fault. There's not a fault to assign to anybody, but it is something that it would be really valuable to address and have it look a little bit more classy.
Historically correct might be the
He
word.
was dealing with a remodel, and we're looking upon, I think, the neighbor restoration. And when you do that, you have to take original pictures, as-built, and match that, but he had no parameters to do that. Should he have come to Jacob earlier, should he, I don't know, so.
Or the historic committee, being that it's across the street.
So, Jacob,
Then it
I'm
was
sure
not-
there's some people in the back that would like to make some comments. How do we want to do this? And then,
So I will say the reason it was not brought up to the Historic Society was because it, as Jacob mentioned, it's not on the historic list. I understand it's in the historic district, but if it's not listed on the historic property list, then there are different guidelines and direction.
Well, I
on how
don't
to
remember
forward
everything
applications.
from 85, and I was on that committee, but they figured that the buildings downtown as a whole were basically historic.
And there are probably a lot of buildings around here that you need to look
Should
at.
be on there, that
Should
don't.
be on there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them maybe should put on a new dress that helps them fit in.
Well,
Not cheap.
That's only
Not
in
cheap.
Well, and that's
remodeling.
possible, that's probably in your purview and Jacob's for more facade improvements through.
But I think the
grant
problem
options.
is, the city is trying to hold people to a standard that's historic, and whether this is on the list or not, the city knows how old this is. You know, it's not the 50s, the 40s, the 30s. So if we're trying to maintain an appearance,
how was it?
Does-
Why
does-
was it before the permit?
I'm sorry?
Was the windows put in before the permit was issued?
Yes, they were. Yep, that was an error on my fault for not putting the window replacement on the original permit that was filed with the city. So that I will take fault for.
And that's where the cart got before the horse, is because that's our cue. If we saw that, building permit change, okay, well, we need to get this to the Architectural Review Committee. we would have talked about, hey, Matt, we need renderings, we need to figure this out. The cart got before the horse. Now we're trying to
Can we get
fix
a
it.
deadline on when this window will be fixed? I mean, you're talking
It's-
about money, but then you're talking about you spent the money for the white windows and then hired an architect. The money for the architect could have gone to the windows if they'd been correctly put in and added to what those white windows cost. And we didn't need a rendering.
I would have loved to have not done a rendering. However, it was my opinion, and I think some other staff members' opinion, that having a rendering of what it will look like in the future would go a long ways as opposed to what it looks like right now, and me just explaining, yeah, we're gonna paint it. So obviously, we think a picture went a little bit further in showing you what the vision is for the future. And just in my personal opinion, even with the glass windows there, I think this potential feature does work in line with the guidelines that are set forth in your historic documents, as far as guidelines for what is in a historic district.
Can I ask a question of Les?
Well, so this is,
They've
so
got a
this is,
picture of it.
so this is a question for Russ. So normally, this wouldn't be such a dog and pony show. We bring it to, before the Historic Landmarks Commission for your recommendation, and then we move on. Now, if you wanna take public comment at this time, I'm fine with that, but as chairman, I think that's your call.
Well, I think we have a lot of people out here that would like to be heard. I think, let's try and focus. If it is the windows or the process we're going through, does the public want to see a process differently? I mean, how can, he screwed up, he didn't get a permit. So, he screwed up. You screwed up, you didn't, so we got that. And
Yep.
unless you guys want to pay for new windows, we'll have to figure out something else. So I think we should hear, open to the public after this, and then if there's some questions, we don't need to keep beating you guys up, but let's hear what they have to say, and try and come up with a satisfaction of what happens.
Can I ask one question, though?
Yeah.
Is there no consideration of taking these windows out, putting them on other city property, you have plenty of property?
The windows that were taken out were actually given to her in the back. So, the windows that were usable,
The windows are in there now.
they're the fiberglass
I
windows.
know. Is there any consideration, in hindsight, now that you're going about it the right way, removing these windows and putting in other windows, saving the windows, because they're valuable windows, using them on some other property?
Well, if you don't like them,
Yes.
if the commission or you decide that those windows should be removed, using them elsewhere, at least on city property,
I don't mean the historic district, somewhere else, somewhere else you have in town or whatever.
the only place that we would likely even consider using those is when you're looking at replacing the ones out here. And obviously, this is a historic building and requires a lot more process and feedback than what's required on that building. So I don't think there is a reuse for the city on those windows. Now, we would likely probably have the city council declare them surplus, and then they would be sold, would be the process. And I cannot recall which local window company that Roger went through to get these. But it is possible that I could come back and let you and the city council and Jacob know what the cost is for replacing the windows with something that was more suitable to your liking. But I would likely, again, caution you that you're holding me to a different standard based on what has been done across the street. And they went above and beyond what was required of them per the guidelines that you have approved in your historic district documents.
No, we're not holding you to a different standard, because even the signs have to be approved to be historically correct on the Molly's Market, on all these different ones out here. To be historically correct or fit within the scope of what the city expects. So what we're doing is trying to hold you to the standard that the city expects of everyone else, but not of themselves. That's my
I believe the intention of what we did with the windows and what you see here meets the intention of what was originally put on in the historic pictures, keeping with the 4 window frames
Okay, well, I think
and the same kind of similar dark gray, blackish surrounding that window.
Well, you say in the future, this is what you're gonna do. What is in the future? In
As
the
far as
future,
timing?
Maybe 2008 or 28.
No, you need to hang around me a little bit more. My clock moves a little faster than government normally. So the next stage would be doing the 3 bay windows on each side. And that would be done next year. That money is already put into the budget for next year. Now, whether the budget committee and the city council approve that in June, then that means July 1st, then I can actually go out and spend that money because it's been appropriated. Now, I know the tile work underneath, that is something that Roger has been itching and wanting to do because it is currently cracked and it honestly looks like crap right now. It needs to be redone. But whether we do that windows and the tile, it's really going to come down to how much it's going to cost either Roger to do it or getting a contractor out to do it.
Well, I would suggest before some of the public start lighting their torches, you require you put this project and you would come to us with a plan and specifications down to the tile, down to the paint, and then I think the windows are a whole discussion on that. That would be my recommendation. I would still want to hear from the public, but I think we just stop and let's do this the way it should be done.
I'd like to see the cost of the windows that were put in and the money to the architecture also. What that totaled.
Well,
They could
that's a
cover the
whole other
windows.
thing.
If I recall, I believe the windows for about $4,000 or $6,000. The architecture was $2,700
The architect was 2,700.
for the drawings. They included about 3-4 renovate or redos of changes and everything.
But you got no specifications or scope of work or anything?
It was just the picture for the architecture. It's literally just the picture.
Being the contractor on the job, you have to have a budget.
Correct.
Okay. And I think you'd have to, we'd like to see that also.
Okay.
And then,
So I will say most of the budget, I honestly wasn't planning on doing the windows until Roger mentioned it. So that was added into the budget because we had some savings in some of the furniture that was purchased for inside. So a lot of the renovation work and dollars went to the inside. Rewiring the entire building is something that we did also inside. So I'm happy to.
Well, if we saw the window bill, we could take out the amount for the upper window and then add it to the architecture. Well, I just think that it would have paid for it. Anyway, do you want the public to be able to talk?
well, yeah, I think, can they come up and speak?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to go back to your?
Okay.
Why don't,
Do you need me to leave this picture up?
yeah, why don't you leave it
Yeah,
up?
leave the
We're all
picture
gonna talk
up.
about it. Why don't you leave the picture, right now, the picture today. There you go. All right, if we could start, have people come up and speak their mind, and let's not go too long.
No, I just wanted to clarify something. I'm Les Waters. About the historic inventory. So in 1984, the Bennett Building was built in 1929, was on the historic inventory. Excuse me, and its significance is secondary, which I believe is the same as many of the buildings around here. Has to do with the date of construction. So I don't know if you're talking historic as far as the designation of the city, or if you're talking again about the.
I'm talking about bureaucratic technicalities. It's a designated landmark, it's on a specific list. The historic district is a separate thing from that. And then there's anything within the riverfront district is subject to the architectural guidelines. So it's kind of, there's a lot of layers.
So I think Audrey's question, she was directing it towards what I'm talking about, which was this inventory in 1984. This is our walking tour. Anybody can get to it and see it on there. Along with that, though, being in the historic district, I know personally there are certain requirements that I have to meet for exterior improvements to the property. So I'm not going to address that. I just wanted to clarify
Do you
this.
know when this building was built? And you have pictures of it?
Yes, it was built in 1929. And this is the picture that was with the inventory. You probably can't see that, but if you want to, you can go to our website and look at it on the screen.
Okay.
But there are no pictures. We do have an early picture of it. It shows the original facade when it was the post office.
That's
Yeah,
that,
it was the post
that one from
office.
last month.
That's right, but there's actually a wider view of that.
Oh, is there?
I believe
Oh.
there is, yeah. That's not to say that I have an opinion that's important on anything else, but I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that there are actually two historic designations at play here, and I think the one that almost everybody's familiar with is the historic district and the
Right.
qualifications of primary and secondary. The house that we talked about before when we were here, the one that you added to the historic district or to your historic designation is an example of one that was in one but not in the other.
Well, I don't know why we didn't put this one on.
Originally to what the city was doing,
Yeah, well, I can't remember, and I even know we took a bus all over. I was on that committee too.
well, you're talking about, which one are you talking about now?
When we did the initial historic.
The 1984 one?
Yep.
So it is on there.
A day or two.
It was on there. I mean, it is on there.
But is this building on?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
It was not overlooked. It's included as
Okay.
almost every building
I couldn't
was.
figure out why we would have left it off.
No, because he's talking about historic city designation, not
Yeah.
National Register.
Right.
Did that help at all?
Well, it made me feel better that we
Okay.
didn't skip
Yeah, I
something.
think it's gonna make more sense later on when we talk about the ordinance, but that's tonight. This is what, Les and Friends handed out last month. It has the photo of the, just if you wanna take a
I kept mine.
take
It's
a look
home.
at that for context of the conversation.
Al Peterson, 101 St. Helens Street. I'm in a building, my office is in a building that is considered a secondary significance building, and the reason it's considered a secondary significance building is because it was built after the fire of 1906. All buildings that were not burned down in 1906 on our historic inventory received a primary significance. One example is the one next door. It did not burn down, so it got primary significance, as did I forgot its name, but the big house on the corner, it did not burn down. Jennifer Grant's house did not burn down. So everything that did not burn down in 1906 was given the title historic significance, or primary significance. Everything that was built to replace what got burned down was given in the historic survey secondary significance. But that is only a title so that they could make a distinction between those two buildings. Other than that, it has no meaning. All of the buildings that are listed in the historic register are considered historic, period. That's how it is for the National Register of Historic Preservation. For the National Register Historic District designation, our little significance standard makes no difference. And just for the record, I'm an architect. I have a certificate of historic preservation from the University of Houston. I was on this committee when we went through the architectural design guidelines. When we established the architectural design guidelines for the downtown Riverfront District, there was a lot of discussion about establishing that. And everybody in the downtown district, when they make alterations to the exterior of their building, they are required to come to you, or Jacob first, which eventually ends up in your hands, for recommendations. That is enforced strictly by the city. and I agree with what you said, Audrey. Here we have a case where a government holds its citizens to a standard, and the government is now trying to wiggle out.
No. It was a mistake.
The
And I'm
government-
I'm tired of hearing everybody say this was deliberate. It was not deliberate. Can everybody hear me? This was not deliberate. This was an error. And it's an error that I wish didn't happen. But us being accused of something deliberate is nonsense.
It happened.
It did happen, and it's unfortunate. But it wasn't intentional.
This is a government that has done this before. I'm not pointing my finger at you, Jay,
I'm sorry, Al.
but this has happened before.
The volcano?
Citizens have been held to a higher standard, and then the government, without pointing a finger at some person, says, oh my God, how come we have to do this? And the comment from the back of the room was perfect. The volcano. It got plopped there. Nobody knew where the hell it came from. Nobody knew who approved it. Nobody knew how it got there. And then we ended up going through a process, and then it got taken away. So, and that's just one thing. On the other hand, let's look at it from a taxpayer's point of view. And someone who wants a nice community. I spend my tax dollars in the hope that my tax dollars will be spent in a thoughtful way so that my community ends up being a nice community. And in theory, all of these standards are meant to do that. So I find it extremely disappointing when government ignores those things. And when, it's pointed out, fingers go every direction, and you can't figure out what the hell happened. I am happy that, at least in this case, someone is saying, well, yeah, we screwed up. But there have been many cases that I've seen where, the fingers go everywhere and nobody knows, or nobody admits it. So, as a government entity, it doesn't matter. The government, one, should follow the rules that everybody else is required to follow, and two, should attempt to do better and set an example. Because really, that's what the government should be doing. It shouldn't be, doing it the way it appears to have happened this time. So.
So I'm Jennifer Pugsley. I'm the owner of 50 Plaza Square. I find it's very interesting. About a year and a half ago, I sat in front of you as a historic review committee, and you set standards for my building, saying, and I appreciate that you say I went above and beyond, but I just couldn't see it any other way. I remember conversations about if I couldn't prove that their windows used to be up there, that I couldn't put them back. We had conversations about if the sign was too big, we had to make it smaller. We had significant conversations about what the facade should look like. So this Bennett building was designed by the same designer that designed my building. I believe he designed the gray building. He designed the movie theater, Jay Doty. In the 1984 Historic District application, in fact, it says that this building would be a good candidate for who's ever going to eventually restore my building to come over and look at this building and see what it looked like, because it was a clue as to what mine should look like. And in fact, I spent about $9,000 matching that tile that you want to tear out so that my building looked like this building. And I'm not here to blame anybody, but let's do it right now. You know, we stopped it. This was a few windows. Let's get a do-over here, not worry about how it happened, why it happened, but certainly it can't go to looking like this new build that looks like Starbucks is coming to town. I mean, it looks like a brand-new building. It'd be tragic that you put this tile instead of that, or something like that. I know there's some concerns about the cost of things, but I think you'd be surprised to know that on the outside of my storefront, I spent about $30,000. Now you're adding up windows, architects, drawings, and that included building new oak doors that looked like the original oak doors might have looked. I mean, it was a significant amount. That money included the inside of my storefront. If you've ever been in the building, you know it's a significant storefront on the inside. So to think that it's cost prohibitive to do it the right way, you're not going to convince me on that. So I think that we are at the point where, you know, however it happened, let's not worry about it. Let's stop it before this gets any worse, because this, to me, is nothing to do with the historic character of the building at all. I just spent the weekend in a historic preservation conference in La Grande. We toured Pendleton, and we also toured the Dalles, all three thriving historic districts. People were walking everywhere. It was incredible. And I see that vision for St. Helens. Not if we're gonna undo and put something that looks like a brand new build to be right here downtown. So I strongly oppose, I do have an opinion, I strongly oppose this. It looks nothing like what it should look like. So.
Matt had mentioned that you got the old windows.
Pardon me?
You got the old windows out
I
of
do.
the building?
They're in my shop, and I'm happy to bring them back. They broke too, so. But it's prism glass, and I wasn't gonna let it go in the garbage. As a preservationist, I was gonna save it, and John asked me if I wanted it, so I said, sure.
How are they taken out? Properly or?
It's just, all I have is the glass panes.
Glass panes.
So there's two that I left behind because they were broken. So. But I'd be overjoyed to return them. Could do something. So I believe it's called prism glass. So it's kind of reeded.
That's made today.
So,
I was gonna say that can be duplicated, yes, I know they've done it.
and I'm happy to pass my window manufacturer's name on to the city if they'd like it.
Okay, anybody else?
I already told my name once, so Kanika Peterson. So anyway, I just want to set record straight. You say that the window look cheap. It may look cheap, but it's not cheap. Fiberglass window is a very good window, and if you replace your home with fiberglass window, it's pretty much the same price as a solid wood window. And however, I'm going to point it out that is a case of big missed opportunity, because fiberglass window come with varieties of colors, and this come in dark colors. This is unlike vinyl window, which is come in only light color, and fiberglass you can find green or gray and things like that. So maybe it's a little bit upcharged, but not much. So this is just like cart in front of the horse and so on, and it's just a case of missed opportunity.
Well, maybe we can make a new opportunity.
No, it's a lesson learned that next time do things right.
Not next time.
Anybody else?
The rest of this time.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
We get an update and how soon?
I think, we'll need to, they're functioning out of that space, correct?
They are.
So if we're just stopping the facade from going any further, that's acceptable. And then we can, have you come to us with you still have is the architect doing anything for you? Or is he just making a picture for you?
It's a contractor that we have kind of working on multiple projects right now, so this was just added to his plate as the group was doing some other some other stuff. They're all currently doing our police study in that program as well. So I asked them to do this drawing to have for you tonight.
I think we need a scope of work to proceed with, if we're gonna put a halt on this, we need a scope of work to come to us of what's gonna happen.
Before it's done.
And, so your contractor is the architect, or?
Our contractor is Roger, who works in our public works office.
So he's a city.
He's the one that did
He's a
these,
city employee.
and he's the one that did these
He's the one who put in the windows.
these pictures.
The work inside, yes, that was done by Roger.
No,
The picture was done by Mackenzie Architecture out of Portland, just the picture. No other renderings, no other specifics about what glass to use, what colors to use, anything like that. It was literally just the picture.
So I would like to say that I did complain about what I saw when I walked in the door. It is the lights up high with the white surrounds that bothered me. And the white surround itself, the framing didn't look like it was quality. And that's what I was trying to express to you then. I certainly don't hold you accountable for the fact that it was done that way.
There's other things incorrect on that when you look at it.
well,
they've got
what I can see of
two
this,
standard size.
the one
Butting
picture,
each other.
the mullions are, probably the window manufacturer couldn't make it any wider, so they cut above each section there, they cut the windows in half and put a heavier mullion. Because this old picture,
They all
it's just the thin mullions all the way along.
That's right.
And so if you wanted to stay true to what used to be.
I do have a picture on my phone of before the windows were replaced, if you want to see what they were, if you can't remember. I'm happy to pass this around,
Yeah, we can take a look at
so you can see. You'll notice on the two far sides there,
Same as the historic picture?
some of this is a full picture of the building, though. So,
That one at home, too.
Some of the windows have been on the outside, it's been counted as HVAC in additional equipment at some time.
Just like that, the mullions went all the way across.
Yeah.
They didn't have a heavy center mullion there.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think before the brick is replaced or anything else, the plan needs to go in front of it. Windows too.
Now, they're across the street, the office, they did a much more pronounced mullions on that, so these were never as beautiful as those.
Well, no, I'm not asking them to be as beautiful as those. I'm asking, like,
They were
the
like-
other picture. I have it at home on the kitchen table. I didn't get rid of it.
So,
I mean, you don't add lace when it is not needed, but,
I guess we'd like to,
review before.
we want to review it, we want to know the tile, we want to know the storefront windows, how they're going to be heat treated, and then what new windows to match the old ones would cost. We'd probably have to go to a mill workshop to be able to produce that. They're not hard to do, it's pretty easy shape. So I think just leaving it back to you of putting this together, like it normally would have come to us anyway. If you could come to us with those items of anything that's going to be done on that facade, then we'll, can, move forward and get it done.
And one of those things is, let's say, restoring or repairing the existing tiles that have problems. What would that cost? What amount of work would that be done?
I can have Roger call whoever he would normally call to get some quotes on that tile
New
work.
historic tile's gonna be very expensive. If it's a matter of fixing some cracks and that sort of thing, maybe that tile's secured, you leave it. That's original. I mean, you can save some money that way, but those are decisions that take into account, and it's very expensive, that old tile. It's, Pratt and Larson, and there's a company in town, they can do stuff, but I think we just need to go back, step back. Nobody's at fault. Let's just step back and look at this facade and bring us what you can and making it restored, as close as we can to that. Hopefully we'll show the public we can bail this one out of the issue.
And so my understanding and assumption is that the plans come to you and not the historic.
We are.
They are the Historic Landmarks Commission,
Okay.
yeah.
But you'll be
Did you
operating
see the hats
as the
change?
plan commission and not the historic. Correct. So I totally understand you're the same group, but as far as my understanding, it's a different perception of if I'm presenting something in plans to a historic board versus a planning commission board. Those are, to me, those are very different standards and expectations.
Okay, so the Historic Landmarks Commission has several duties, like any commission. And if this was a historic landmark, there would be a public hearing, they would have the formal decision-making, and we'd have certain standards that are very elaborate. For buildings within the riverfront district that aren't designated landmarks, as in this case, we have the architectural good design standards. What our code says in that case is when we have something that requires a building permit that changes the outside, we need to bring that before the Historic Landmarks Commission in regards to the design guidelines and get their opinion and recommendation to staff as to its compliance with those guidelines. So it's I don't know, historic preservation light, if you're gonna kind of put it in a general frame. I do want to, so the reason I get a little riled up on this is, because now Al talked about being on the Historic Landmarks Commission before. When I started here back in 2007, the standards were whatever the committee thinks fits within Old Town. That's all it said. And back then we're like, oh God, this is not terribly effective and it's very vague. And so we wanted to create these architectural guidelines. And this was something that, oh God, we really need to do this. And we were fortunate enough to get some PSU Masters of Urban and Regional Planning students on board to help us create these guidelines that we adopted. And so for me, having worked with these guidelines over the years, and I've worked hard, and you've seen a lot of things go before you, and there was a screw up, okay, that happens, it's not fun. But just to have the fingers pointed after all those years of work, it's,
Yeah, no,
I
appreciate that.
hope you can imagine
Well, I
the
don't think it's a
frustration.
matter, we know there was a screw up. It's a matter though of, let's fix it.
Sure, yep, and I think everybody's on board with that. The important thing is to look forward.
That's what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
to get it historically correct.
Yep.
Can I get a consensus of hands of painting those the proper color, not white, obviously, to the period color, whatever, or tearing them out and putting new ones in? So replace them, okay, or paint the existing, save tax dollars.
You have a picture before?
No,
It's right here.
no, this is a.
We have it on hard copy.
There was a picture taken before anything was done that still had the planters in front of the building.
Who's asking?
The question I'd ask Jacob is it the look of the historic district that we're approving, or restoration to historic materials?
Can you go back to the white?
Does it have to be
Can you
wood?
go back to the white windows?
Could it be fiberglass but still look like an old window? Does it still meet the standards? That's my question.
The standards, the architectural standards talk about trying to preserve historic features when you can. But it doesn't prohibit using alternative things, because it's all about the appearance. You walk by and go, oh yeah, okay, you know, you get kind of that feel. If it was historic preservation, we would be very persnickety about materials and stuff.
Well, you're,
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about, is that's.
I know. If you look at the historic photograph, the side light windows do not have the thick mullion. However, the one over the door does have the thick mullion. So it's sort of a,
This is probably an entry petition or something.
yeah, exactly. So to me, I'm fine with the ones over the entry, but I think that they should take another look at the ones over the storefront windows.
Yeah, I thought it was tiled between the two middle ones, so that was fine, once they're painted or something, but the other two.
So the thing that caused me to be grouchy about it was the quality of the materials in the plastic windows up high. It did not look, I think you can get fiberglass to mimic wood, but that wasn't it. At least not in my eye, and that's why the glass.
Divided lights are not true divided
Oh, I don't
lights. So when you paint those, you can't paint
Are
the,
those true divided lights or not?
they're not.
Oh, I doubt it. I looked at them and you sort of can't tell.
Well, then no matter what, the mullion is
paint
gonna be
them.
white. So you don't have a true divided light, and you're still gonna end up with that white stripe down the,
Well, you have a shadow bar in there.
it's behind the glass. Yeah, it's
can't
behind
paint
the
the
glass.
thing
They're not
either.
true divided light windows.
Sandwiched inside the glass.
They're sandwiched in the glass.
The glass.
Well, the true windows would have a wider.
Stinker.
Ease in cleaning, you can snap it out,
Yeah, exactly.
snap it back in.
Well, we can beat this one.
Yeah, the horse is almost finished.
Um,
Schedule another time for them to come.
Thanks for your input, everybody, and Matt, thank you. Go ahead.
Can I just want to get very clear communication, so I'm moving forward in the right direction of what you have in mind for those windows. I don't have a clear direction of what your expectations are for those windows, and before I call and get quotes and everything, I would like to know what your expectation or what your anticipation is. Do you have an issue with the fiberglass and you want the fiberglass to go away? Do you have an issue with the middle bar section? These are questions that I'm gonna be asked by the glass person, the window person, and I'm not gonna know or have any answers for them. So I need some clarification on what direction you would like me to go.
I doubt they can produce you a window that wide without, and then you're not gonna have the true divided light. So I think you need to go to a sash company and say, here's the size. We need a true divided light, and the mullions will be wider than and be more pronounced. And I guess like Al said, the center one has always been divided, but they'll have to match the ones on the side too. So it would be all the ones up above.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds to me like this rendering can't happen with those windows.
they can paint it dark enough, it'll be fine.
If
They
they're
can.
white, if they're white inside. They never look like that.
The configuration of the
Don't
lower,
replace any tiles.
lower windows are, they're separated, is nothing like what they were.
No.
So I guess the window,
The bottom windows, the storefront windows, they have a
Narrow separation.
different,
You're looking at the picture that was before it was edited. You need to look on the picture on the very back. See the final, this was the first rendition before Jacob and Jenny did their marks. This rendition with the three original kind of pane windows is what the vision was. So to keep that same similar style. So do not look at the one on the other page.
Yeah, so you would
Look
see,
at this one.
the first one, it didn't have a recess.
So you can see all the marks where Jacob and Jenny kind of marked, hey, there shouldn't be a line there, we've got the recess that you've got to put in. So there's adjustments that we've made along this route because we anticipate doing obviously more work. Obviously, all that work would come to the Planning Commission or the Historic Preservation Commission to give thoughts on the materials and colors and all that kind of stuff.
What's gonna
I
happen
don't
with the
think
cornice
that's
that's
obvious,
on
but
there?
it will come here.
Metal cornice, I think it's metal. It's just gonna stay, your funds are to keep it.
Usually my job is just to come up with the money. So.
Well, your job's just to come up with the money. You want this job? Taking all the heat?
Well, this is not my first time taking heat in this environment and any past jobs. I tend to get the projects that nobody else wants to take on, and so I don't mind a little heat. And I actually appreciate the feedback and everything because it, like I said, it helps me give myself more direction of when I'm talking to window people or Roger specifically about what the intention is, what the look is supposed to be. This feedback helps me go back and be able to explain to staff and contractors of what we're trying to do. So I appreciate the feedback and the comments that I've heard tonight. I really do.
Putting a finance guy in with the historic preservation project.
It's like oil and water,
Yeah.
right?
When you talk to your window person, they need to look at the storefronts too.
Correct. Yes.
So you'll have all that as one package.
Yep.
Storefronts priced differently than those windows, because those gotta be, if they're changed out.
Yep.
Forward the window.
Great, well, we'll look forward to what you come up with.
Thank you.
Okay, public hearing agenda. Now, 8:08. Public hearing is now open. This is let's see, this is a conditional use permit at 165 North 11th, Wildflower Collective. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 102 on map 4N1W-4AC. Applicant is Wildflower Play Collective. The owner is Anna and Philip Steinhardt. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters, required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict, interest, or bias in this matter? Any? Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commission to make a fair decision? Oh,
We own the property right next to this building, our south wall, or south side of our property border test. And I just have some questions.
Okay, the question is if we're not at public testimony yet, the question was whether anybody feels like any of these commissioners cannot make a fair decision in this issue.
Oh, okay.
So if you think someone's biased or has a conflict and, would be inclined to one side, something like
I
that.
misunderstood. Thanks.
You'll have a chance to talk, don't
I'll
worry.
get a little more reading done here, and then you can have it all. Okay. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, the staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed. Rebuttal by the applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. Following statements are required to be made as commitments to the hearing pursuant to the city code, ORS 197.7635. Following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.100.0401, CUP, approval standards and conditions. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that is found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of the approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority and the opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. It's Jacob's turn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional use permit, as was stated. It is for the Wildflower Play Collective. They're a nonprofit organization offering a membership-based kids' play space and family resource center. And they are clear that they are not a daycare facility. That's something they wanted to make sure was very clear, because when they talk about their use, people say, "Well, that sounds like daycare," and they want to make sure that they're not put into that box. So it's a little different thing, and some of them are here to help explain it further once we get to that point. Let's talk about the property, though, a little bit. It's there in the corner of 11th and Columbia Boulevard. It's by the IGA, Lewis and Clark Grade School, and Meriwether Place. The building is a 1910 home. The main floor was converted to non-residential space many years ago. There is still a dwelling unit above in the second floor, and the applicant desires to occupy the ground floor space. Something that, and the site plan you have up there is kind of the base map. The one in your report has a little bit more drawn on it, has the vision clearance triangle, which we'll talk about in a bit, and some of the parking marked. But something interesting about this property, it has no off-street parking whatsoever. All the parking for the property is within the street. And North 11th Street off of Columbia Boulevard is a dead end. It doesn't go terribly far until you hit a cliff. And so, it's a dead end. There's a variety of uses proposed both inside the building and outside the building, largely pertaining to child play. And I think I'm going to go right to the conditions. There's some questions about the commission, and I put it in red in the staff report just so you can see that stuff a little easier. Now, they talked about putting up a fence before the outdoor play as a preventative measure. You know, you do have a busy street there. And one of the conditions that we have that you could require is to require that fence to be up before outdoor play as a condition of the proposal. And then there's also, you'll see on condition 2, shall require compliance with number 3. Now, number 3 talks about before they install the fence, we want a fence plan. And that's basically to make sure that, you know, they don't have to put up a fence twice. We want to help them and make sure things get done right. And in talking to them over the course of several months, you know, land development is not their normal thing. And so we want to make sure they make the right decisions, and having a fence plan will help do that. And so there's some things to think about with the fence. One, do you mandate site obscurement or not? Or do you just, you know, well, you don't care. Either way, you're neutral on that. And that's just a screening question. Of course, if it's not screened, you know, it is our main street, and we like to have life shown on the street. You know, we don't necessarily want to build walls, but, you know, they may want privacy too. So it's just a matter of whether or not you want to mandate screening or not. We don't want the fence in the public right-of-way, and especially along Columbia Boulevard, there's several feet behind the sidewalk before that actual property line starts. And so we want to make sure that they're aware of those things before they put the fence in there. There are some underground utilities. I know there's a sewer line on the east side. And that's just, you know, usually when we're answering fence questions, we tell people, you know, call 811, it's free, and then you know where the utilities are to kind of be aware of where to be careful where you dig. Another thing in there is the vision clearance standards in the site plan, which is part of your packets. The approximate vision clearance standard is put in there. It doesn't
take too much of a bite out of the property, but because it is a well-traveled street, the vision clearance standard is something that's important. Something else to think about is the maximum fence height allowed by the development code. Technically in the front yard, which is the first 20 feet of North 11th Street between the building and the property line there, the fence is normally limited to 4 feet in height. However, as the commission, you can allow that to be higher as a condition of approval. For example, you could allow it to be 6 feet in height, and that is a much more difficult obstacle for a child to climb, 6 feet as opposed to 4. A good example that I like to use when we used, and this is a way to not have to require a variance for a fence. And a good example was several years ago when the jail did an addition and we wanted a really tall fence. Well, makes sense. You want a really tall fence, and so as a condition of approval, we just allowed it. And so that's something to think about. And that's captured in proposed condition 4. Another thing to consider, and I don't necessarily have a strong opinion, but with a conditional use permit, you can always think about other things that may apply to help the use not conflict with the surrounding area, and so you could consider time restrictions if you want. We'll see what kind of public testimony we get. For example, for outdoor play. Another one is outdoor storage is not allowed by the conditional use permit. And a lot of times we'll put that in there because if you have a business with outdoor storage, that requires a conditional use permit, but if it's not proposed, you can't review it. And I know that it's not proposed, but sometimes uses can start to accumulate stuff, and that's just a condition just in case. If you feel like it's not necessary, we can always take that out of there. It's pretty straightforward. We kind of shared in the applicant's adventure trying to find a property. We were talking to them for several months as they were trying to find properties. And it finally boiled down to this one, and we're finally here. The sad part is a lot of the other places I was able to say, no land use issue, just make sure it's okay with building code and you can move in. In this case, when we looked at the uses, because this is mixed use zone, this is the only mixed use zone they were looking at, we felt that it fell into a conditional use category because the mixed use zone is a little more conservative than some of our other zones like the Holton Business District and Riverfront District. And so that's why we're here. So I'm glad it worked out for them, but we do have this a little bit of bureaucracy to go through. But we do recommend approval with some of these conditions. Some of them, as I've written in red, are things for you to consider. And I think that's all I have to say about it. Unless you have any more questions for me, you can open it up to the applicants.
Okay.
I have a question for you. So, one of the things that the applicant proposes in outdoor use is a playhouse, playground structure, mud kitchen, whatever. So playhouse sort of looks like a accessory building, right? Maybe even like a storage shed. So why couldn't they have outdoor storage that looked like the playhouse?
Well, and so and the reason outdoor storage came into my mind is because of all that stuff that could be out there. Yeah, okay, when is it storage and when is it a play area? And if it's kept nice and tidy, most people wouldn't call it storage. But if you just have a bunch of stuff out there, God, do you start to cross that line? So it's a good point, and your mind is going the same place mine was when I was thinking about this.
If we have an outdoor storage, if they can't disguise it, it's something that doesn't look like outdoor storage.
And if they had outdoor storage, we'd require it to be screened.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And that's where the whole do you mandate a sight obscuring fence or not. Yeah.
Well, that's my discussion.
Okay, can we hear from the applicant? And I want to, before you guys start, I do want to let you know, my wife and I own the property to the east of this parcel here.
Just behind it? Is that
No,
right?
down Columbia Boulevard.
Oh, okay, great.
And I believe you called me on the phone. You did, okay. And you had asked if we could not have a fee for the Jacob's application.
I think I was trying to find a definition of
Okay.
something.
I was just saying, talk to the mayor, because if you could get it reduced, because you're a nonprofit. Anyway, so that's the conversation I've had with you. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, we are from Wildflower Play Collective. We are two of the co-founders. There were 5 original co-founders, and we started with the Shedco competition of 2019. As our startup, our business plan developed, we decided we would be a nonprofit and have kind of, our ball has been rolling since then. We have been looking for a location for a very long time within St. Helens, and we got a grant from the Columbia Pacific CCO to launch this program because we don't have indoor play spaces in the community, in the county. So we are creating this resource for families with small children. Yeah. Our target audience and the members that we will accumulate are families with children that are birth 0 to age 6. So that time when they may be going to a daycare for recreation at times or just for necessity of the family, but otherwise if they're just at home, they may not have a play place in Columbia County to go to that's not a friend's house, a grandparent's house, their own home. And this would provide that place where they could play, where they could have meetup groups with other parents, or the other resources that we're hoping to provide, which would be meetup groups with parenting classes, fitness classes for adults and children, an array of benefits for the community for this small population that's 0 to 6 and their caregivers.
And our grant is based on a space having trauma-informed care, or that's like a space that has that, and also increasing family resilience in the county and reducing adverse childhood experiences for children in the county.
We have several community partners over the last year that we've been developing, and we've been talking with the organizations that are currently here, Columbia Health Services, Community Action Team, CCMH, and other businesses and organizations have been very excited for this project. Early intervention and ESD, just that this time in a child's life when they're so young is actually very, very important for what's going to happen the rest of their life. It defines how secure they feel in themselves and what they're going to be able to accomplish. It defines their health and wellness long term. And if we can contribute to that in a very positive way, we find that is very beneficial. So, we would love to take questions if you have any. Our proposed idea for an outdoor fence is within, we are not the owners of the property, we are leasing. The owners are not here, but we have had conversations with them that they want to fence the area regardless of its use, if it's residential or commercial. And we are very flexible of what kind of fencing, so we are happy to have your ideas about that. Indoors, we also wanted to follow up on what Jacob said. We are not a daycare. We're not proposing people to leave their children in care of anybody and leave the premises. We are hoping that people come and play with their children and have an experience similar to what you would do at a children's museum, with toys that are meant for imagination and gross motor skills, and not screens watching TV while a parent kind of checks out. Just that communication and connection is enhanced in our space as well.
The closest we have in town is McDonald's.
Exactly, and actually we just heard that they took the play space out of McDonald's today.
Yeah, they did today. I just wanted to add one thing. Also, so this model that we have, also for the Family Resource Center part, we have a swap closet that families can donate items they no longer need, and then other families and members can take the items that they do need, like clothing or baby gear, and that
With no charge.
with no charge. Yes,
So you're a member, you drop things off you don't need, you take whatever you do need.
and their the model is based on an existing model in St. John's called St. John's Swap and Play, and they have been around for 11 years and are a really beloved and important part of the St. John's community. And we are working with them and modeling this program after that program.
I read an article in the Spotlight, February 28th, and you did mention the daycare process, and so I guess that's what.
Yeah, absolutely. So the only way forward for us and that we've ever thought would be a possibility is, and this would only happen with the go-ahead from the city and all of the people that we would need to talk to about that.
We've already talked to Mike about it.
Is that the adult stays on site, and we are proposing to use one of the areas of the building as a co-working space. So a caregiver that has a small business on the side or needs to get an hour or 2 hours work of emails done, and then the childcare would only be run as a co-op. And so within that, there would be somebody who would be willing to watch the children. Other people know who that caretaker is, and Amelia can elaborate if there's a different plan or a more.
The difference there is the parents are always on site. So it's like a gym or like a church where there's.
Yeah, I just didn't want to make sure you're not getting in the weeds with Jacob as far as what's required and that sort of thing.
I have a copy of the article in the file. And it didn't surprise me because they talked about their method of childcare, so I wasn't surprised when I read it. But the kids aren't just being dropped off and the parents leave, and so I think that's.
And the space is only 1,600 square feet, so in that amount of space, you will hear your child scream on the other side of the building, or if they need to, you'll know.
You get hung up on the code thing, and you're going great guns, and all of a sudden, Jacob's knocking on your door.
And that's just a small piece of our business model. The rest of our business model does not include any kind of childcare.
I have a question regarding number 2, require fence prior to outdoor play as part of the proposal. I think for me that is absolutely essential, and I want to make sure that the fence did not have the possibility of little fingers grabbing it and climbing it.
Right. I like to hear that as well. Yeah, when Jacob just said that, there's no thought in our minds that we would put a play structure or any sort of play equipment in the yard without a fence.
I wouldn't
A
let my
full
kids play out there without a fence.
Mine either.
You understand, if we put it as a condition, it's basically a mandate.
And that is fine with us, yes.
Yeah, and we could even talk a little bit, I mean, I didn't personally envision, for example, fencing in as much as we could, just it's a giant space, so it would be a very expensive fence.
I think that would come down to the owners and what they
Yeah.
would like. And we'll come back with that proposal in the future
Yeah.
and discuss that with plans and the owner's involvement.
Well, tonight we'll probably give you parameters of what we'll come up with, and then design it from there.
I had a question. Do you have to decide what their fence is made out of tonight, or just the size and width?
Well,
and
I
all
think
that?
there's site obscuring and there's chain link, so.
But they don't have to commit to
There's
that.
another, with their options.
I object to about chain chain link is that it's climbable.
I'm just,
Fence
I
needs to be
didn't
not climbable.
suggest it, I just said they don't have to sign off on that because they're not the property owner, just a fence before you go outside.
There's a chain link fence.
Yes, but those aren't little bitty kids.
Kids can climb anything.
Yeah, there's preschools there's a preschool at that school.
I walked out of my, it was good for me, it was open.
Commissioner wants to
I walked all the way down to Kalani from school, if my school, my sister was there.
So I guess it comes down to the outdoor storage and if it needs to have a obscuring kind of fence, if you're,
6-foot fences.
Let's get into that when we deliver.
well, no, don't ask it, but is there outdoor storage that you would, you said you didn't talk about outdoor storage, but you have need for outdoor storage or a fake playhouse?
I don't think Jacob is wrong that there's a potential that that might happen in the future. It is a small location. It's something that we know that we're going to grow out of, and so in the future we will most likely be in another location in St. Helens.
I think that.
But we don't have any plans for storage right now outside.
The only thing that we would need to store would be like outdoor toys, and so that's the only thing that I could think of. We don't have, like, there's storage underneath the house if we need it, and we don't have things that we need to store.
But like you said, there's ways to do that that doesn't require a whole fence. A little barrier around the storage.
Okay, yeah, we aren't proposing like a tough shed or anything like that. We are just saying things we might want would be like a sandbox and maybe like a little playhouse. But, you know, the playhouses are only like not very tall.
They say Fisher and Price on the front of them. That's your contractor and builder.
Fisher Price Architectural Design Stand.
Yeah, I think they come in.
Actually, I bet they have.
Historic.
Take the plastic.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. We'll listen to the rest of the folks. Okay, we have testimony in support of this application.
Al Peterson, 101 St. Helens Street. I'm also the current chair of Shedco. This organization was part of the Shedco's business plan competition, which, for those of you who don't know, is meant to promote business along our Main Street, which goes from the train station uptown all the way down to our historic district. Their proposal was a very well-received proposal. They were asked to be in the final presentation. The issue that our organization had with the presentation was that we were attempting to promote a new business, and the committee did not feel that a nonprofit kind of fit the parameters of the business plan competition, but committee members thought this was a wonderful proposal. And so as a member of Shedco, I'm testifying in favor. I'm also testifying in favor because it's a fabulous location. It's across the street from a school. It's across the street from a grocery store. It's in the center, it's pretty much in the dead center of St. Helens. And I think it's a great location. It's easy access for these parents who do have these children to come to. And I did glance through the report. In terms of screening, I do not think you should require a full-blown 6-foot-high screen fence. One of the notions of a term that was coined, I think, in the late 60s is called defensible space, which basically means you want spaces to be open and seen by the public so that the public can act like the neighborhood watch, I think the term is. So I don't think it should be a full-blown screen fence. I actually think it should be an open fence that people can see through readily, because you want these children to be seen by the public, and you want, if there's something bad happening, you want it to be seen, so that the public can help prevent it. So I'm not sure what you want to do with the fence. I don't really have a recommendation for you as far as the fence goes, but I think it should be something that can be easily seen through by the public, and even if some kid's climbing over it, the public will see him climbing over it before he gets all the way over it. So that is something to consider. And I don't know, I'm just kind of on, I don't know if, you know, I think a 4-foot fence would be fine. You know, it's gonna take a kid a while to figure out how to get over it. By that time, some parent who's supposed to be on site anyway is slapping his hands or something else. So that's my comments as far as the fence goes. I think it's a good location, and I think that it will be a benefit to the community.
Anybody else speaking in favor? Okay. Neutral testimony. Anybody out there, one or the other? Okay. Now we have testimony in opposition of this application. So you were talking earlier, are you for it, against it? Do you want to come up? Can you come up and speak?
Sure. Don Perrett, P-A-R-R-E-T-T. Well, when I first looked at this, I thought, you know, it's a really great idea, and it would be an asset to the city. I think the city could use something like this, so I'm speaking in favor of it.
Okay.
I do have some questions. And a couple questions I had was the number of kids that are going to be going to this, and staff. How many people are we talking about here? And I'm asking this because we own the next building to it up there. And
On 11th Street?
Pardon?
The adjacent property on 11th Street?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify for.
And it's a townhouse duplex, 3 bedrooms, so we get kids in there as well. So there's really no point to that question, except that I'm just wondering what kind of thing we're going to have going here. What are going to be the hours of this? And another concern I have is cars. Like somebody brought up, there really is no, I guess it was Jacob brought up, there is no off-street parking there. And the parking is limited. And my tenants have problems with people wanting to park in front of the house there, in front of their apartments, which is okay during the day, but in the later part of the day or early morning, it's hard for them to get out because they don't recognize that there is a driveway into this. And but we do have the same problem with the old church over there when there's a function over there. Then I don't know, between the two, are we going to have the street park pretty solid or something? I don't know. What was your feeling when you looked at that, Jacob?
Well, and I talk about it in the report, you know, if you have a peak demand for the Wildflower Play Collective site and you have a peak event going on at Merriweather, you know, you could have a lot of parking congestion. And there's a lot of parking on that street. The problem is it's not well defined. And unless you look at maps all day and you know where the right-of-way line is, I mean, most people don't. So, you know, in front of this building, you have 8 or so striped spaces. And on Meriwether Place, you know, along there, there's a whole lot of street parking. But people, and, you know, I don't live there, but I don't think people use a lot of that street parking facing Meriwether Place just because it's not really designated and there's nothing to cue you, oh yeah, this is where I should be parking.
When they have events, though, they direct people to, events are typically on the weekend and in the evening, and they direct them to park across the street.
Okay.
So people are parking in the staff parking.
For the school.
At the school.
Mm.
Yeah, every time I've gone to an event at Meriwether Place, they've directed us to park across the street. So I think that if, I mean, just as an idea, one suggestion might be if they're gonna have open house or have more than 6 or 8 cars, then they might wanna let their members know that if these spots are full, that there's parking across the street. And I would think their peak times are gonna be when people aren't at work, which is also when there isn't school going on. Because I know Meriwether Place always directed us across the street. And when the city had an event there, we actually put lighted barricades out there and actually had somebody with a safety vest watching for the kids to cross back and forth, because it was after dark. Because it's dark and people go by there pretty quick.
I don't know if there's any solution to that parking problem on there or not. I just thought I would bring it up because it is a problem, can be a problem. And then the play area, now this was going to be all fenced in, is that?
Well, right now, there's a condition proposed to require the play area to be fenced. And it sounds like the applicant supports that, and they talked about it, you know, before anyways. And so now, I don't know what the final decision will be yet, obviously, because we're not at that point. But I would say the odds are pretty good that that's gonna be a condition that ends up being on there.
I think you brought up the fact that Columbia Boulevard is a busy street, and it's not very far between that proposed building and Columbia Boulevard, or for that matter, 12th Street. So that's why I asked what the range of ages are going to be, because kids can get out there so quick. So I would urge you that a fence of some kind would be, to keep them out of the highway out there on the street. The other thing was, does something like this, does it have evening functions? We're gonna be looking at cars coming in and out of there in the evening, or?
Well, and in the newspaper article, they talked about a time limit, and they'll have a chance to come up and answer these questions. But the commission, because it's a conditional use permit, the commission can say, you know, that these are the restricted hours, if they feel it is a necessary condition. Then, you know, they don't have to do that. And the article talks about 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Accessible from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and members can drop by anytime. But, you know, the applicant, I think, can expound upon that.
Yeah, kids under 6 probably are not a midnight kind of ordeal.
Oh, yeah, they're up to 6 years of age, okay.
Yeah, she just said birth to 6 years, so.
From 0 to 3, they're up all night.
There you go.
Well, I really wasn't looking to put any restrictions on them or anything. I was just, I got this letter, so I thought I'd come down and find out some points on it. What kind of interested us. I can't really think of anything else except, like you said, there is a lot of traffic, can be a lot of traffic on that short little street, and there really is no turnaround on it. You go down and you can get turned around down on the end, down past close to the bluff there, you can get turned around. But I do see the traffic in and out there as a problem. Anyway, that's all I had.
Thanks for your input. The applicant for, back up.
Thank you for being here.
I guess first we're, might as well knock things off. Hours of operation, so your proposal was in the
7 to 7 is tentative. The one in St. John's, I think, is maybe 8 to 8. My guess is that we may end up having some facilitated classes for parents. It might be extending a little bit after hours and maybe go till 9 is my guess. But those would most likely just be parents without their children at that point.
Why is 7 o'clock in the morning?
Kids are up early.
Yeah, it's not a matter of them
School
going
start.
to work because they have to stay with the kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say 7's a little early.
Well, the school across the street.
I never would have had my kids at something like this at
Sure.
7 in the morning.
As a parent with
8
a
maybe.
kindergartner now, he goes to school. Yes, I agree. Maybe 8. He goes to school at 7:30 is when elementary school starts now. It's very early. And so I'm up and out of the house by 7, and then have my 2-year-old with me all day. And yeah, we could walk over straight after we drop our son off, and he goes to Lewis and Clark, so it's
Yeah.
close. But we could walk over right away and play for a couple hours, and then go to a library story time, and just depends on how active people want to be with their kids. And
Very active.
yeah.
I had him skiing at 2, so.
Okay, number of people you're going to have on site during a typical day, is that, can you guess?
We have, based on St. John's, where I'm a member, I've never seen more than 3 or 4 families at a time, unless they were having an event. But we aren't really in a position to do the same kind of events in that space. So our events will be held mostly at another space. So
For a large amount of people.
for a large amount of people.
So if we have more than 10 families coming to a parenting class, we may be hosting it at the rec center where there is parking.
So probably like, maybe there would be like 10 families there at a time, something like that.
10 families, 2 per family?
10 cars probably. 10 families would probably max out the space, and people would not want to be in there with that many children inside.
Yeah, that would be
And be like, oh, I think I'm going to go park instead and come back when it's not so busy. I love the idea of talking to IGA and talking to Lewis and Clark and asking permission to direct cars to go across the street and use their parking if that's necessary, and posting a sign even on the outside of the building or in the close to the parking that is on the street, and just to keep them out of the.
IGA, but that lower parking lot, is that Lewis and Clark? Yeah,
By the swim
because they've got the lower one that's not.
Yeah, exactly. The one
that
that's
would
closer to the
belong
pool.
to the park too.
So-
How come they can't park along 12th? I mean, along Columbia Boulevard?
I think the bike lane is in the
You're watching someone rock the boat.
Is there a potential that we can get lines to Merriweather though, so that people do know how to park efficiently in that space? Because on Sunday, they're definitely parking in, that whole street, and
Yeah, that would be a question for Public Works when they do striping. When they moved in there, they had a stripe their 2 little parking lots, and the stripe spaces that are perpendicular to the street are technically street parking.
right.
But there's a whole lot more street down there.
Isn't that all gravel though?
I
don't
think a lot of
it's
it
asphalt.
is. I think a lot of it
And I
is.
noticed,
Yeah, it's good.
on 6th Street, where they used fire hose
Oh, yeah.
for markers
Oh, interesting.
to stripe it.
Yeah, by the Amani Center.
Amani
Yeah.
Center, yeah.
So I would like to bring up fencing.
Yeah.
I would really like to make sure that fencing happens, and I don't know, it's back from the road in the property that you're on, there should be fencing. It should be possible to see through the fencing, and it should not be possible for kids to climb the fence.
Okay. What do you think? You've seen the deer fences, right? They're kind
no-
of climb fences. They're kind of posts with like a wire in between the posts.
If you could.
You can
climb-
still see
if you
through.
could climb the wire, I'd be worried about it. If it's upright posts and a top rail and a bottom rail, I'd be less worried than if there was a possibility of stepping
I
bit
think
by bit.
they're too fine as squares to grip.
They could be, yeah, or put the shoe through. They wouldn't be able to climb if there's no place for a shoe to go.
School has the same
Parents
fencing.
supposed to be watching them, so it's a cycle
true.
event.
You've got a whole bunch of little kids.
Well, I know we had cyclone in Portland.
We could bring back our.
This also isn't a daycare. They're there with their parents, so they're there with their family group.
That's what I'm saying.
Could we bring our proposal for fencing to you?
Well, so
Set up with the city.
what'll probably happen is, we'll talk about conditions once we close the public hearing, and they'll deliberate and talk about this stuff. And right now in the conditions, prior to installation of a fence plan shall be submitted to the planning department. So then you're just dealing with that. And they may have some parameters as a result of this, so not in the right of way, some of the basic stuff. And they may say, well, we think that this fence needs to be pink in order for this use to operate properly. And obviously, I'm just making up a ridiculous example. That way, okay, well, that's one of the parameters. So when you bring this fence plan, well, where's the pink color? I mean, it needs to be pink. And it could be, the climbing thing and stuff like that. But you would come to us.
Yeah, and we had talked a little bit about doing a wooden frame fence style with a wire inside and like with a gate. So
It
those
looks
are
more like what you would see in a garden.
those are typically like sometimes they use hog panel inside, but then that's climbable. So we could potentially use a
Smaller.
a smaller like galvanized style livestock kind of fence that's inside of a wooden frame.
Barbed wire.
Barbed wire. Razor wire.
Electric fence.
We're getting it to different fence standards now.
We've got it. Electric is gonna be.
Okay.
Sure, electric prohibited.
Can I
My
bring?
concern is trail safety. I want
Absolutely.
to be able to climb, but I do want visibility
know,
to be good for people
When
on
you're
the
done,
road.
we have to paint it lavender. I mean,
I think the visibility is nice, and something that as a business seems very good. And for the community to be able to see those kids, just like you see the Lewis and Clark kids playing outside, I think is very playful and warm and good for the community. I would ask that we're not held to a higher standard than a daycare facility or a school, potentially. So if that means that some of the fences might be climbable, that just that consideration is taken into account. There will be supervision, and we obviously do not want to see any kids climb out and get in the road. We have a plan, even if where it comes out to the street and the sidewalk in front of the building, there's a pathway, and we would like to fence that off as well, so that they can't run straight out into the cars in the parking lot, or where it looks like a parking lot.
On 11th.
if they enter the house on 11th, aren't they going to be going out to play back door?
Probably not.
Well, we are thinking that for now, the outdoor will be restricted. Inside the home as well, in the business, it's restricted to members that can enter in a key code. It's not open to the public, and there won't be staff on site all the time. I know you had a question about how many staff members might be there.
So similar to the gym up across from the
Exactly.
post office.
Yep, by any time. And so, most likely, we would have a portion of the fence that would be accessible, opening the gate, and it would close on a latch, and that would parents a time to see their kid run out into the 10 feet of front yard that's there and stop them before getting the gate, but most likely it'd be high enough that they wouldn't be able to grab it and open the gate
What I'm
themselves.
hearing is you know your liabilities, and I'm assuming with the members, no, I'm serious, with the membership, they're signing that they are in charge of their child.
Absolutely.
And its care. So right there, they can put in any kind of fence that they want to, in my mind, up to 6 feet high.
And a consideration that I just wanted to bring up is that the outdoor play, the outdoor play items that we buy, we would like to feel are reasonably secure. And so having just that as a consideration.
So that portion of the fence will also be key coded, and so the playground will not be open to the public. But the public could see it and want to become members, and then they would have access to it. We're not going to be turning away memberships.
Where are you gonna enter off 11th Street?
So I don't think we would need another access point. There is a back door in the back of the building.
It's almost a second level back.
It is, there's stairs coming down, and so I would wanna fence that in as well, so that there's no reason that a kid could get out the back door and out of the fence. But as of right now, that's not an issue.
Who has a burning question?
That's something I'd like you to think about with your fencing and with the vision clearance area that a driver needs getting out onto Columbia Boulevard is at a later date, decide to put some plantings in. Do not put anything in that view area. Plants grow like crazy out here. And I have had for the past 30 years a situation where there was a chain link fence, and to get out on the road that I have to use, couldn't see, because there was all kinds of blackberries and ivy and everything that grew along the fence that no one cleared out. And it's just keeping that sight line really clear.
That's a good reason to keep the
So-
fence visible
I
anyway.
know you're not gonna have that immediately.
Oh, yeah.
but if
It's a
at
great
later
thought.
date You decide to put plantings in or whatever, be careful of that area.
Thanks.
That whole piece of property anyway. The whole thing. That's a lot of fencing.
It is a lot.
Okay, any more questions?
I've got a
Did we answer
question for them. When do you propose, after everything is settled, to have it in operation? A month, 2 months, 3 months?
Yeah, based off of this, we were planning on hoping to have open houses later this month and opening by the 21st or early April. So coming up real soon.
Yeah, so Dawn, they don't need to get any building permits. So this is the main, permitting that's necessary to get started, and so. Sometimes, you get through this and then you have to get build whatever, remodel, but in this case, this is the main
Yeah.
thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Hearing no further questions from the commission, no further responses from the staff. Public record is closed, and this matter is ready to put it table for deliberation or discussion. What? Okay, what do you want to work on first? Fence?
So you just want to go down through the conditions and?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what I meant.
Fences, key safety. And you have to be able to see through, and they can't climb it. And if it meets those two criteria, it's golden.
So I'm assuming condition 2, which requires the fence prior to any outdoor play as part of the proposal, it's not controversial, the applicant is on board with that. And then fence shall require compliance with condition 3. We'll get into that, but it seems like condition 2 is pretty solid.
Yeah. leave
Okay.
that.
So, and I'm just facilitating
Can you
deliberations.
do it?
What's that?
Yes.
Okay. So, condition 3, so these are the things that, okay, well, what do I want to see in the fence plan? And some of them were, so do you mandate site obscuring or not? We heard some testimony on that. No fence allowed in the public right of way, that's a given. Consider underground utilities, that's a given. Vision clearance is a given. Do you want to let them go higher than the 4 feet along 11th Street? You have that ability to say, you may go as high as 6 feet height, and that just gives them the flexibility.
I would go with the may have, and like you said, that gives them the choice.
And then, okay, and then anything else like a fence that is harder to climb, or is pink, or is razor wire, the other things that aren't listed here, but we just discussed. And technically, barbed wire and razor wire has to be on top of a fence 6 feet or higher in our
It has to be
code, so
properly defined.
that won't work, but
It has to be round for decoration.
the mandated decor.
Just a visual.
There's lights in there.
Something tells me that's not the,
I don't think it needs to be site obscuring.
No.
No,
Okay,
I
so-
think
Let's get rid of
it
A.
should actually say that an open fence
Should not be site obscuring.
should not be site obscuring. Right.
And if they want outdoor storage, they address that.
Well, we
when
didn't finish
it
the
comes up,
fence.
Or some other type of obscuring, besides the entire fence obscuring.
So, are you saying you would rather reverse and say, shall not be site obscuring?
Just don't mandate it being
Yeah.
site obscuring.
Okay, and how does everybody feel about that? Just leave it silent and let them,
I think about a daycare center in Seattle I used to like to drive by. It had a fence that was shaped like waves of the ocean and a mountain, and then there was a castle. It was so cool, I went and
Well,
built
have
my
you
fence
guys
just
got
like
your
that. I
work
got
cut out for
trees
you?
and a mountain on my front fence. And it was just a neat thing, but it was something that needed to be in this very busy street, and wasn't in a town like this. So
Once they get
I
the
think
wood-
it's appropriate for this.
When you get the wood fence put up, we'll have the kids paint a mountain.
It's the arts budget.
Kind of like,
And all that.
yeah.
I don't think it should be a solid fence, because.
I don't either.
You're gonna take that corner and just make it really
Yeah,
hard.
it'd be ugly.
It needs to be, I think, lower and open with a wire, like they planned. It sounds good.
okay, so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
won't
I don't-
mandate site obscuring, I think everybody's on board with that.
Yeah.
It's better to have the vision.
So then, keeping out of the right of way, underground utilities, vision clearance, those are given. I heard some support for allowing them, they may go up to 6 feet in the front yard. And that's just giving them flexibility.
Let it be, yeah, their choice.
Yeah, I
Choice.
think
Yeah, as long as it's not site obscuring,
Likelihood
it's no
that
big
they're
deal.
gonna have some climbers amongst the kids. Fence needs to be ready for that.
So then anything else?
What about, should we want any landscaping on that?
I think it's already landscape.
Along the fence?
No, because we don't want to obscure the.
Well, you wouldn't be
If they-
obscuring it, you would just soften it as, I'm not talking about all the way along. But I'm just bringing it up.
Somehow being in front of it, I don't think it's necessary.
I think that limits them, their use
If
of
they
the
want to,
space.
fine, let them plant a tree.
But number
Arbor day.
6 should be altered to outdoor storage must fit the outdoor storage code or whatever it is, Jacob.
Well, it's
I'm
just.
sorry, what?
Outdoor storage, if outdoor storage is proposed in the future, it must meet what is it,
Traditional use.
obscuring.
Well-
Is that always a conditional use thing that we put in? Is that code? You said if they have outdoor storage, it has to be obscured.
Yes, and they don't really have a proposed, and so
You can come in later and do that.
they could come in, yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
yeah.
Okay.
And so
take it out.
I think that means you keep condition 6 out.
Conditions. That's fine.
Yes.
It just says that,
Skip
so
five.
this conditional use permit doesn't allow outdoor storage.
Yeah,
Well,
any at
either
all.
that or 190.
Oh, you're saying by,
square feet.
by not allowing it, they have to come in and talk to you about it?
Yeah.
By not putting it in there, they have to come in and talk to you about it anyway, right?
Yeah, technically. The condition is, let's say,
This sounds like prohibition. You know, it doesn't necessarily be a prohibition, just they have to talk to you about it.
yeah, it's, well, let's take these in order.
Oh, okay, I thought we were done there already.
I'm
Sorry.
there.
So are we good with the fence? Is everybody,
The fence is great.
Okay.
We got it.
This is done.
Everything but color.
so the number, yep, all right, so you're cool with,
The time,
We haven't got a 5 yet.
so 5, time.
we have a question here.
Oh, we were just wondering about the back side of the property and potentially if we wanted to put some privacy fencing, because that higher property looks right down onto.
Privacy, and we're just giving you the option of the
What,
fence.
yeah, so,
The rest is yours.
they're not mandating site obscuring, that's all.
Oh.
So if you build a fence and if you come in, and technically the public hearing is closed, but this probably won't be
Sorry.
one that's appealed and go to higher levels. But so that means if you came in with your fence plan, okay, I look at the conditions, and if your fence is see-through, that's okay because we did not mandate it. But if it's site obscuring, well, that's your prerogative.
We'll leave it to your choice of what works best.
So the conditions as tentatively proposed right now would not prohibit you from site obscuring that west side.
Okay. Just the Columbia Boulevard side and that corner. It should not be site obscured?
Oh, we're not mandating site obscuring. The fence can be site obscuring, but you'd have to stay out of that vision clearance triangle.
Okay.
That's why we want to make sure you come with a fence plan, just so we're all on the same page, you don't have to do it twice.
You could do the way it's in the castle.
Yes, if you felt that was necessary and you're inspired by Mr. Cleary's illustration.
You can come by my house and take a look at it.
Yeah, right. He'll be working on it for the next year, so
I'm
don't,
sorry.
don't hurry over.
It wasn't a joke, I actually did do that, so.
Okay, 7.
Now, just a minute, 5 weeks at a time. She was saying 7 to 8.
Yeah, potentially 9 for parent classes and stuff.
Well, do we do till 9 then?
Or do you leave it silent? You know, that's the question. Do you even feel like it's necessary?
I don't think it's necessary.
So the question I would have would be,
They get excited
hours
seeing the deer coming.
obnoxious to the residents that live nearby.
Sure, yeah, and that's, you know, and that's,
Take care of that too.
and that's why we have conditional use. You know, the whole idea behind the conditional use permit is it's a use that, okay, well, this is a little different in this area. We want a little more thought and scrutiny, and time restrictions are a typical thing to avoid that. Now, in the report, I do talk about the city's noise rules now, and that ordinance does exempt sounds caused by organized athletic or other group activities when such activities are conducted out of doors on property generally used for such purposes, you know, like playgrounds. But the conditional use permit would let you, well, okay, we know it's kind of a residential area, maybe we don't want screaming kids at 3 a.m., so you would put a condition on there that, you know, just keeps outdoor activities in at a certain time or hours of operation. So if you want to think of a time limit, you know, okay, that's one thing, and then where do you apply that? Do you apply it to the outdoor activity or to the indoor activity as well?
It's like your city noise ordinance, take care of that.
Well, that's what I just talked about, because it looks like it exempts children from play for the purposes of the noise ordinance. So I don't know if it does it very well. Of course, I don't recall having complaints about children playing, but there's always a first time for things.
Come to my house, my next door neighbor.
As a city.
Oh.
I can understand.
Well, the house is focused pretty much towards the high school or the school, and then you've got the event center across the street running late. So that whole area sort of can be run late, all of it, even the stores open late. So I don't see why this would, if the entrance was
just
over
leave
by
it
the
open?
residential end or the duplex there, might be an issue, but they can always complain and get something done about it. So I don't see it.
It's not a large
Do
crowd
we
there,
even
though.
need to put a time on it?
That's what I'm saying, just leave it.
We're gonna skip the time.
Okay, does everybody agree with?
I think that's a clever way to go.
Okay,
Up to 6.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. Dan, now we're at 6.
No, we're getting rid of the time. 5 is a goner.
So now, you don't have to put 6 in there. It still technically applies, because,
5 omitted.
Well, it's bigger than 200 square feet, they have to come get that permit. So,
Fisher Price?
it's Fisher Price, contractor and builder.
Okay.
so,
If
and
it's over 200 feet, it would be outside storage, or is that, clarify that.
well, outdoor storage can be a lot of things. I mean, it doesn't have to be buildings, it could be materials. It could be piles of toys that sit there. It's kind of a fine line, and I think whether or not it is storage or begins to like, God, that's kind of looking like storage now. If stuff just sits there for a long time, and I think that's what I was thinking. So here is, so let's say in the unlikely event that they get a shipment of 1,000 Cabbage Patch dolls, right? And we're like, well, these have a bunch of storageware, so we'll add this to the outdoor play activities. And this is, I'm just making it up, but, so, and then you have this pile of Cabbage Patch dolls that sits there and sits there static for a period of months. Oh God, that's kind of looking more like storage than an outdoor, than as it relates to an outdoor play activity. So then, someone complains or we observe that, and well, God, we maybe should give them a call. And let's say they transfer, these folks, move on, their kids grow up or whatever, or they move and someone else takes over. The conditional use permit stays with the land. And so then we go, hey, new person, or maybe it's 10 years from now and they forgot all this. We go, well, we're looking at your permit history and we have this conditional use permit that explicitly notes that you didn't have outdoor storage allowed by that conditional use permit back in 2020. And it kind of looks like that's what's going on right now there. And it provides a more sound basis for action. And sometimes I'll put a condition in there as a tool to help use in the future. Now, in the same token, I can say, well, this is what your conditional use permit approved. Outdoor storage was not a part of the proposal. If you look at the zoning district, the businesses that have outdoor storage are require a conditional use permit. So if this Cabbage Patch pile continues, then we'll need a new conditional use permit. And that's all correct. And that's a path that we can go. We explain these things to people a lot. And when you're talking about code, it's just very abstract, and it doesn't always resonate with folks because not everybody has to deal with code every day. But when you have a condition that's black and white, it resonates quicker, and sometimes that's why I recommend conditions like this.
How about if we just add without screening at the end? It's not allowed without screening.
Oh, that's a good idea. So if they end up,
You do what they want to,
Yeah.
but that's just screening. Future, or never.
how does that, the rest of the commission feel?
Future storage unit has to have screen.
Storage,
You wanna
outdoor
put in
storage, outdoor storage, whatever it is.
Cabbage Patch pile of dolls out there. This is
Whatever-
ridiculous.
Whatever the outdoor storage is for.
You need a vinyl thing and teach the kids to put their toys in.
Yeah, a lot of plastic tubs, and that's not.
The one we've got, they should be brought inside.
Yeah.
We got room in the back there. I got room underneath too.
1,600 square feet.
Well, there's a,
Pretty big.
Audrey, did you get screening for your kids' toys?
Please pick them up afterwards. No.
okay, what are we gonna do with this?
If there's that many Cabbage Patch dolls, you're gonna call code enforcement anyway.
They're ugly.
Well, I'm sorry my example was the best.
Jacob's.
You can put this in here. I'm gonna find out the name of the new doll that was for you.
So, does everybody agree with keeping it in there with Dan's edition?
What's this edition?
Without screening.
Without screening.
I didn't see
think that's
screenage there anyway.
Well, what's,
I didn't hear you.
Storage,
A couple
there's screening.
plants.
what's screening? A 6-foot fence?
Yes, also
Whatever it is, or plants, or
bushes.
And a 12-foot?
Or a
Plants and what you
fake
want.
playhouse, or.
Well, a shed is, stuff stored in a shed is screened.
Yeah.
It's the stuff on the outside. So, another example, if you go down Old Portland Road, you know, we have some storage places, and our basic requirement is to have a 6-foot screen for outdoor storage. That's a good example of outdoor.
That's for garbage.
Not doing that.
And facilities.
Garbage Patch Kids.
There you go.
Oh, it's Cabbage Patch.
It all comes
Not
back.
Garbage Patch.
It's Garbage Pail Kids.
Okay.
Pail Kids were the.
I mixed them.
Well, did they say they needed outside?
No, he put
No.
it in.
No.
The red ones are
I put
his
that in
things
there,
that he
yeah.
put in.
His.
So let's leave it as is.
Okay, let's leave it alone, cause it's not gonna
Without
affect them.
screening.
Okay, the
So
sign
as is, as written.
Yeah,
As written.
whatever. 7, they have to do anyway,
Okay.
and
Yeah, 7 and 8 are
they have to
catch-alls.
do anyway.
Yep.
But now, did you get this? 6 is 5, 7 is 6.
Oh, yeah, we'll get that worked out.
Well, I just figured after those dolls, we had to. I make a motion, as amended, we approve this.
I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
And motion for signature.
I'll make a motion.
Second it. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Done.
Don't buy that many Cabbage Patch dolls, Fred.
So,
Garbage Patch.
the one thing I want to say, well, so this, you know, you'll see a notice of decision with, the the report and stuff. But Tea Time asked for those signs that have the time restriction. Because, it was a eating and drinking business, they wanted to have turnover. So if
Come on, Dan.
you want those signs to be removed, talk to our Public Works Department. Because I don't think the 15 or 30-minute time restriction, that may not work for your particular use.
It wouldn't be great.
Yeah. So just so you know, those aren't necessarily mandated to be there. That was the request of Tea Time.
Nothing wrong with it.
It is now 9:20. Public hearing is now open.
You guys will have like, open house or something when you guys are getting closer?
Yeah, I'll send you.
So everybody can check out your work? Super.
Development code amendment. City of St. Helens.
Do you want me to, give you our number in case issues
This is
arise?
legislative land use hearing. The subject is amendments to the City of St. Helens Municipal Development Code, the applicant is City of St. Helens. Legislative proceedings.
You all right? Almost gotcha.
Any member of the commission declared ex parte in this matter? Not here. Okay. We're moving on here.
Yeah, it's hard to do an ex parte contact on code amendments anyway, so.
Yeah, well, anything you do. anyone from the audience to object the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Okay. Rules for the conduct of the hearing are set forth in a handout on the table in the back of the room. Generally, in order proceedings will be as follows: required statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those opposed, rebuttal, close of the hearing, close of the record, deliberations, recommendations. The following statements shall be made. Commitments to the hearing, the standard for the recommendation by the commission shall be based upon St. Helens Municipal Code 7.20.1201, standards for legislative proceedings. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards applicable standards previously listed or such criteria as code or plan or if person believes applies to the recommendation. Jacob, may we have your report?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you should be aware of these amendments. We've talked about them at past planning commission meetings. We talked about the accessory structure rule, increasing that from 120 to 200 square feet for the minimum size that doesn't require a permit. And we also talked to the council about that too, and there was support for that. And then if you read all of the text amendments, you would see that there's there's 21 pages of it. And, just a small portion of that is the accessory structure change. The rest of it has to do with the floodplain rule. And we did talk about the freeboard requirement, or the elevation that a building is required to be built at above the base flood level, and how our residential standard had the 1 foot standard, but our non-residential was at 0. And after discussing this with both you and the council, before we formally included this proposal, we got buy-off supporting 1 across the board. So that's included in this and all the other stuff that we were supposed to do. I talked about it before, but I'll talk about it again. The reason we're doing these flood code amendments was because in November, we had a community assistant visit from a staff member with the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. It was someone with their floodplain program, basically a state person with the floodplain program. And what the community assistance visit is when someone representing FEMA or on behalf of FEMA, like in this case, they review your floodplain policies and implementation of the floodplain program to make sure you're doing it right. And the good thing about that visit in November is, they said we were doing everything like we were supposed to do, which, I like to hear that because I'm the one who is charged with floodplain management in the city. But they also said, by the way, the state of Oregon and FEMA recently worked out a model code, and we want you to change your code in about 6 months. And when I saw the amount of changes, I went bleep-a-bleep bleep and started working like a madman. Now, fortunately, this was in early November. If we had this community assistance visit like last February to September, I don't know what I would have done, to be honest with you. I really don't. The only reason I was able to get this done is because we found out in November, and we didn't have a long-range planning project going on. We just, the Riverfront Connector was done. We hadn't started the one we just started, the St. Helens Industrial Site, and, timing. But if you spent some time, you'll see that there's a lot of changes in there. A lot of them are good. In some cases, you're just rearranging where things are at, but you can tell that, there's lessons learned from other places as far as clarifications and things of that nature. But for the most part, it is in compliance with the model code. The elevation was something that we did have some latitude on. We could go from 0 to 3 feet. That's why we had some of those discussions early on. But there's a whole lot of stuff here, and if you want to ask me about any of the particular provisions, I can certainly try to answer those for you, because there's a lot of hours. A lot of hours on this, and several people looked at it to make sure the cross-references and stuff like that are right, and I'll certainly read it one more time when we're at the end. But that's the history. This is a legislative action, so you are giving the recommendation to the city council. Of course, staff recommends approval, because it's going to be really nice to be able to tell people that the accessory structure rule is 200, not 120 square feet, and then just to get the floodplain stuff done. So any questions?
I have a question mark beside something on my packet. It's on page 217.124.030 and 040.
Is that part, is that,
On page 2?
Yeah.
of the one of the attachments of the staff
I guess
report
it's
itself?
The City of St.
Staff
Helens.
report? To the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Page 2 of 5.
Okay.
17.46.040 and 17.124.030. I'm just needing to clarify in my head what the verbiage boils down to as what are the core concepts here.
Oh, okay, so what you're reading, this is a comment from a state employee who works for DSL, someone who's been there for a long time.
Jennifer Brown.
Yep, Jeva Brown. And so she's pretty detailed, and we get comments that are just, okay, you're doing this, please be aware of that. So these are comments from her. They're not things that prompted us to change the rules, but I can tell you what she's kind of talking about. So that first one, where it talks about alteration of water courses. So in the floodplain rules, you know, there's stuff where if you alter a water course, there's things you need to address. And what Jevra is talking about, we as a development review department, if we believe that there's a wetland on a property, state law requires us to notify the Oregon Division of State Lands just to say, hey, we're aware of this wetland on the property, we have this development proposal, FYI, and then they can respond and act accordingly. And what they're saying on this first one, on 1746.040, is that chances are, if you're altering a water course, there's going to be wetlands involved too, and it's going to be a best practice to make sure you remember that notification to the state. So it's just kind of a cross-reference of agency requirements, essentially.
Can I clarify that just slightly?
Yeah, sure.
Not necessarily just a wetland, could be a waters of the state stream.
Oh, yep. Thanks, Dan. Wetlands and streams, waters of the state is what DSL.
Waters of the state is the umbrella under which lakes and oceans and rivers and wetlands and everything are. Waters of the United States is the federal.
Yeah. And then, let's see, this next one.
Can I ask you something more about that, though?
Oh, sure.
Back in your actual your changes, on page 14 of 21. I don't know, it comes up other places too, probably, but this one caught my eye. It's provisions of flood hazard reduction, alteration of water courses, part of the flood carrying capacity within the altered or relocated portion of the said water course is maintained. I had an issue with this a few years ago where the city considered a stream that was jurisdictional, a flood watershed, and it was pretty hard for them to recognize it as a jurisdictional stream because it was part of their flood water course system. It was just number one, whatever, and it's, Willamette Street drainage, actually. It was in Godfrey Park when that permit came in for a daylighting stream there. And the piped stream under that drainage was a jurisdiction jurisdictional water body, and they just saw it as a pipe of flood control. So that's a problem, you know, a public works problem in their head, because they're just seeing this. This is saying that this is a conveyance or flood hazard. And what Jebra's saying is, we start messing with that, make sure it's not also a jurisdictional water body.
And the problem is this, we have several chapters, and we do have chapters that deal with sensitive lands. And, we as the planners know that, one thing can have several different layers of regulation on it, floodplain and stream. And basically that's what Jebra is talking about and what Dan is reinforcing. Do you think there should be additional language there? I mean, it's something that...
How are you addressing Jebra's concern?
Well...
for that particular thing?
Yes. If it's in a floodplain, it could also be a wetland, and so you have two different chapters to deal with.
Or waters.
What I take from her is she's just a FYI, be aware of this thing. And so, Catherine, for the second part on page 2, realize that wetlands and waterways often occur within floodplains. That's what Dan was talking about. Let's see what section. I think that was something that... I gotta look at the section Jebra was talking about here. Oh, okay. Jebra is talking about the accessory structures where we're saying no permit is required. And that a lack of permitting removes the trigger for the wetland notification I mentioned. And so then there's the potential that someone could build a shed where they're not supposed to. And that was her concern. So in that case, if you go to page 21 of the text amendments, you could add some sentence about, unless it requires a permit for some other provision of this code. Then there's that disclaimer that, well, from the size of the building standpoint, it doesn't need a permit, but there's other things that matter. And we know that. For example, you got to have a house before you have a shed. Or if there's a wetland there, well, you're not supposed to build a shed right in the middle of the wetland.
Too many people think they have the local approval or they don't need a permit, they're done.
Yeah.
And that's where you as a service to the community are saying, it's not just me you could have to deal with. If it's not on your local wetland inventory, how are you gonna know? But anyway.
Sure. The system's imperfect. So does that, I think we threw a lot more details at you than maybe were necessary.
I think I really needed to understand the difference between waters of the state and other waters.
Okay.
It's coming along.
They're required by state law to notify Department of State Lands. Yes.
And that could be first things as simple as building a shed. A shed big enough to require a permit. There's wetlands on the property. Okay, well, we have to notify the state.
I have a question, but if somebody, if you buy a house and you have wetlands delineated on your property, you're gonna know that when you buy the house. One would think if you bought property, there's delineation if there's a wetland there. So it shouldn't come as a surprise.
Does that show up in escrow typically?
Yeah, that's the problem.
It shows up only if there's a floodplain involved, because that's the only way it's gonna kick out. You have to do your due diligence to see. And I mean, people go and look on city and state maps. Ideally, I don't think everybody does that, but.
And not everybody's wetland savvy. Some people just have no idea.
I had no idea, but I knew that the property next to me was low and it filled with water in the winter.
Yeah, ours is like,
Yeah.
I live on a wetland and it wasn't designated at all. We're not, I was kind of
If there's a
surprised we weren't in
cattail,
flood.
Yeah.
Well, it is, it does say if you overlap, it's got the state
Yeah.
and federal maps that kind of go over it.
But even if you have all the rules, it doesn't keep people from putting up a shed.
A building without permit.
It doesn't prevent any of that.
I'm making mine a native wildlife habitat.
Very good.
With a nature shed in it.
Wildflower seeds.
450 cubic yards?
Irises, yeah.
Okay, do we move on to, well, you did your presentation. Anybody in support of this?
No, don't like
Opposed
it.
to it?
For all your hard work.
Okay, rebuttal to it. Rebuttal yourself. Okay. All right.
You need a motion to accept,
This would be a recommendation to the city council.
okay, the recommendation to recommend it.
I appreciate all you guys' deliberation, because this has been the effort of many conversations. I know they're tired.
Seconded, okay.
One of us is seconding.
One of you could, okay, take a pick.
And since you're right next to my ear, sound got to my ear faster from you.
Okay, well, how about all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. It goes to the city council.
Yeah, that's why these people are still here. Well,
We're just so interested.
I bet.
Especially so.
But they know.
These people need to hear from the story.
No, from a long time ago. Some of them know.
We gotta stay.
Okay.
This one's gonna be easy. Okay. Okay, planning commission vacancy.
Okay,
You
so
firing me or is she?
That doesn't seem easy.
Julie moved to Forest Grove.
Oh, really?
And so she put in her resignation. And I know you emailed me right after we
I
put out the
did.
ad. And actually, she thought it was you too.
Well, I thought maybe you talked him into that one seat on the city council.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
and the seat's not empty yet, so.
Well,
So Julie, she moved to Forest Grove, and she said, you know, she'd try to fill the seat. But, you know, once we received that, well, time to see if we can fill the vacancy. So we put out an ad. We have 4 applicants.
I did not get the full
I
one.
didn't know what
Did
the.
not come, and I know it's not in the draft.
I guess we're the 3 applicants.
Sheila told me.
Oh, I was like, so there's 3 of us.
Hyphenated with.
Okay, well, we'll make sure the interview committee gets all of them. And so the window is the 12th, which is Thursday. And then we'll see if we have more than the 4. And so what we need to do with Council Carlson at the helm is we need 1 or 2 of you, which is typically what we've done in the past, and I'm assuming that's still okay with you, to form an interview subcommittee so we can interview all the applicants and make a decision. And so I don't know if any of you would like to do that.
I'll do it.
Okay.
A second?
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, so Audrey and Russ.
What day are we doing it?
That's something we'll have to figure out. So first step is getting to the 12th deadline, then confirming with Council Carlson that we have an adequate list of folks, which you're probably going to say yes in this case.
More than 2 is an adequate.
More than 2. And then Christina will probably help figure out when we can meet. It will be, because of your work schedule, it's going to have to be after 5 o'clock.
4.
After 4 o'clock.
Yeah, 4 o'clock is my thing. That's why all the council things that we've been doing have been started at 4.
Oh, okay.
Do
That
we
way
meet
it's
them all
not-
at one time?
What?
Do we meet them all at one time?
We did them in half an hour sequence last time.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on their schedules. Now, ideally, we could do it all in one day.
Right, if it were,
Yeah,
okay.
because I think last time we did it like 4, 4:30, 5. I just did them rapid fire and then scored them at the end.
So that's an
We've
exercise.
never had 4, so.
We couldn't get any when there was 2 seats available. You think I'm kidding? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah. 2 of us would be gone now.
You don't think that. You never know. It's a suitable applicant, not just.
Well, I understand it. I understand it.
So that'll be something that will happen in our near future, and you know, I don't know if the selection and the appointment will happen before the next meeting, but that'd be tough because of the council scheduling and the mayor appointment and all that stuff. But I would reckon it could be done by May. But anyways, so we have our interview subcommittee, so we'll work with Russ and Audrey on that.
We will do it.
All right, review ordinance 3250, adding a historic resource building to the designated landmarks register.
Now, in my almost 13 years with St. Helens, I don't think I have ever presented or showed the commission an ordinance. It's always at the council level. But in this case, I'm like, well, you probably want to see it.
I've never seen one, and I was on the historic review committee before the planning committee. Never seen one.
So, this is the ordinance,
Yeah.
which includes the house just up here on Second Street as a designated landmark. And I didn't include a copy of the 1980s map or the old list, but the map was pretty terrible. And when Jenny and I started digging into the list, we found some inaccuracies. And so I wanted to show you this really as a courtesy. So we updated the map, and we have this black and white version, and then there's also an aerial photo version. So those historic resources really pop. And then also the updated list with some corrections. So I just wanted to be able to show you this stuff. And the discussion about architecture review was kind of a good segue, because this is the list of the city's designated landmarks, which, if altered, would require what we call historic resource review, where you are the decision-making body for those alterations or modifications. So, as the Historic Landmarks Commission, I wanted you to be able to see this.
Just because I can't see it from here, is there, what, about 16 on the list?
2022.
Yeah, do you just want to look at the
You wouldn't mind?
hard copy for your, you can have that if you want, I don't need it.
Is the old post office on this list? Shouldn't it be 24?
I don't, oh, this one. You're getting on right now.
Hey, I warned you when I came in.
Yes.
Before 7 o'clock, I warned you.
No, you did.
Edwin Rosh House should be on this list.
Which one is that?
Which one's that?
Keith Locke's house.
Oh, yeah.
Should be, it's a very significant house, historic house in town.
Our list needs to be updated. We have to take a short bus and go for a trip.
Yeah, there's two lists. There's the primary significant list, and then there's the candidate list, and that's something that we've never worked on.
People have to be willing.
People have to be willing, but the candidate list lets you, okay, these are the properties that we want to consider.
Yeah.
And then you work on
Right.
talking to property owners or incentives from that point.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, exactly.
What's his name, that attorney guy's house?
And then the Williams Cox house is on the National Register, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the one individually listed property on the National Register in town. So we have the district and the whole primary and secondary, but that's the one property that's individually listed.
Where's that one?
That's the house that the Grants live in right here.
Oh, okay.
You don't know Cox Williams' house when we say that?
I know Grant's house.
Yeah.
I know who lives there now.
It used to be on the corner. They moved it there in 1912, not that anybody cares. But-
Really?
Yeah, it used to be other.
Okay,
That's interesting, though.
acceptance agenda.
Whatever you need.
So moved and seconded?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes, all right, on planning director decisions, home occupation, Darcy Street, and home occupation, Shore Drive. We don't have to do anything on that? Okay. All right, any information items? I've got one.
It's the illuminite. The night lights.
Oh,
I know, I want to know where it started.
well, you just go ask your mayor. I've got a question
He
for you.
doesn't want to talk to me.
Maybe I have an answer.
Okay. I see that you approved the new location for the police department.
Yes-ish.
Ish, okay. Well, I'd like to make a comment to
Well,
that.
they're still doing study, and there's the primary location and there's a secondary location, because there were questions brought up.
What's the secondary? I know down
18th Street is the secondary location.
18th Street.
Isn't that
Is
18th?
that the old PUD site, Wygant?
Yeah, we had the pot place there and.
Right, everything that's never opened.
PGE, not
Yeah.
PUD.
Yes,
The non-storage shed.
PGE?
yes.
Okay, all right. Well, when I saw it come,
Both sites have extenuating circumstances, and the council had questions they wanted answered.
okay, that's great. Well, I would like to add these to the questions for the first site you're looking at.
Is that the one across from Johnny's?
Yes. For one, it's in a floodplain, and a public entity shouldn't be compromised by a flood.
I made that,
I was gonna say.
so, police department is a critical facility.
Yes.
And in our code, critical facilities, what it says is, critical facilities, citing critical facilities in hazard zones, you have to rule out all others, and then you have to elevate the facility and access to it. This is all stuff I've already explained to the council, and access to it, up to the 500-year floodplain, or 3 feet above something, whichever's higher. And the floodplain includes the intersection of Castor and Old Portland Road. And we made this clear to the council. And so they're gonna need to have an access that goes the opposite direction up to Old Portland Road that's high and dry.
Money, 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 money.
I just see an elevator like they have in Oregon City.
So anyway, that's one reason I don't like that site. And the second reason is I think community policing is very important. And the presence is down there across from a bar in a nondescript intersection, away from everything. Up there at the Wygant property is right on a main road, close to
Totally
schools, visible. You can walk to it from the schools or whatever. It's right there. So they have a presence in the community rather than occasionally see a blue and white.
That's
So,
good.
If you would take that to your buddies.
Well, no, I mean, just quite honestly, the city council was leaning heavily toward the location at 18th. And the police, the men that wear the uniform, came back 100% in support for the Castor Road location.
Okay.
So that
Out
was
of sight,
us.
out of mind, and good lunch across the
That was
street.
that was not their thought. Their thought
High
process
speed
was,
in there.
is increased traffic and train crossings and blocking, and how many choices would they have to get to the other side of town from that location versus the other. And they're just thinking about response times.
They should not be the only ones making the decision.
They did not make a decision. They were asked by the council to weigh in, and the police chief brought that report back. Because we were like this, and they came back with that opinion. And so because of the 100-year floodplain, and because of some other issues at the other location, Matt was given kind of marching orders to move forward with clarifying these things, and then an estimate of both with those things considered. And I don't remember the exact things.
Yeah, my understanding is our focus is on that Old Portland Road side.
That's primary.
Yeah.
But they didn't let the 18th site go away. Because I like that presence on Main Street of the police station. You know, who says it has to be a one-story building?
No.
You know, I mean, if the size is an issue, there could be parking underneath the building.
That's a whole city block.
It could
City
be,
Salem just built a new.
yeah, it could just be
new ones.
taller. It could be parking
Just
underneath the
over
building.
Because they wanted to put the circuit court in there, or one of the courts?
Yes, yeah, courts.
Yeah.
So.
'Cause I mean, if parking is an issue and access is an issue, they can always build a taller building and have elevators. But I think that we just gotta look at from the community's point of view. So I would not say that we're 100% at Castor Road because of the floodplain issue.
What's that business in Clatskanie, PUD, whatever is built up in that huge fill?
Isn't that the PUD?
Clatskanie River?
Oh, the new PUD?
Yeah.
Oh, right on
It'd
the-
have to look like that,
The
right?
lodge?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we're talking, we have to do the road and the intersection there
Yeah.
too.
yeah.
That's
You'd be
ridiculous.
driving by looking down at Johnny's.
Well,
Well, no, there would be access from behind.
behind, yeah, I don't, is Google Earth on this?
Access would be behind.
Screw up a lot of patrons there, like, what the hell?
I came in, we were at ground
You
level.
realize they'll have snow and the rest of the town won't?
No, and I think, you know, it's a physical thing, but also, yeah, you can listen to the staff that's gonna be in and out of there, but I think you really gotta look at also the community and what it's serving. It's not serving anybody down there.
Yeah, you don't have to preach to me, because I was a big proponent of the 18th Street. But just because of that Main Street
18th, you get that?
close.
I vote for 18th Street.
Still on 18th Street. It's still on 18th Street, just farther north.
Yes.
It is still 18th Street.
18th Street's right there. The other excuse that the police gave was that there's more expansion possibilities on this site.
It's bigger.
Go up.
Well, the site is bigger, the
It's bigger
18th
for
will
one story,
limit 'em,
everything
but-
one story.
Okay, so here's Johnny's, here's the recreation center, here's the area that they're talking about, the police station on
Any size.
city property. So the floodplain is here, and, you know, they could have an access here, but to have an access that's not in the floodplain, they're gonna have something that goes up,
That's a solid rock mound
probably this
there.
way and out there or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
It's a solid rock mound, it'd be expensive.
On the flip
Is
side,
that
it's not
in
gonna wash
McCormick
away.
Park?
No,
McCormick Park is here,
Who says it's?
so it's across the street from McCormick Park.
Standards for the 1 foot.
Yes.
I have a question, because I've not driven back there to know my point of bearings. As you go into, White Paper Site, if you go off this direction, if you go off that direction, wouldn't you connect to Old Portland Road?
Uh-huh.
So isn't that, I mean, that's sort of, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, let me get up and point to make sure.
Okay. You have to go up higher.
So here's the site.
Right.
Show
I mean,
where
go
Show where
down.
Old Portland Road is.
Go down that way.
Show where Old Portland.
So this
See where
is-
Goo- No, see where Google Earth is?
This is Old Portland Road.
No, see where it says Google?
There's a creek there.
Down there.
Yeah, down here.
Yeah, but couldn't you, I mean, in a,
That's Columbia River
magical
or the
world.
creek.
it's not Columbia River to the creek.
Well,
You think,
If that goes to the
Well, no,
recycle
channel.
place?
Yeah, can't you go through that
No.
way?
no,
It's Milton Creek.
no, the recycle place, that's down here.
Down further.
That's Railroad Avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's no connection. I guess if you went through the Port of St. Helens property and then went over that rickety bridge to Railroad Avenue, you could, but it's not a direct route.
Okay. I just don't know my point of reference back there. It's like no man's land.
Okay. But there is right of way through here. There's a sewer line, and so, you know, somewhere through here it'll have to weave its way up.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, the whole council was in the 18th Street, and it was like, or this, and the last meeting, it became Castor Road or 18th. So it's kind of like it.
Well, it came out like it, Castor Road.
There was additional questions. We hadn't let 18th Street go. But this is the starred site, if they can fix that floodplain issue, because Jacob did report that. But they have to tell us how much that's gonna cost, what the implications of that is. Because if they come back and that's like $1 trillion and the building only costs this much, probably not.
And your studies are gonna be $500 billion, so it doesn't.
Yeah, it's gonna need studies. I mean, we're gonna meet about it next week, and one of my comments is, the first thing we gotta figure out is this floodplain stuff, and that means getting, topo data.
I think you should put a limit on studies, because if there's too many studies to do that project, it's too much money already.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, it could be spent on some.
Waste all your money on.
And then you got all this spent for paperwork, like we see so much of it.
Go up to the
We gotta preach, Russ.
You know what?
18th and Columbia Boulevard.
I'm of the opinion that no new studies until you've implemented a study. You do all these plans, and until we finish the plan, we shouldn't start a new plan.
Oh, you
Yeah,
mean,
just run up to Columbia Boulevard. So that's the size there compared to.
Right.
Look at the activity around that site and what you've got. The police can, you said.
The infrastructure's already there.
What problems the police have? Going across the railroad track?
Well, they just thought that they would be faster response times.
No,
And I
you
think,
gotta go across railroad tracks.
well, I think some of the pushback is that looking at the population growth of where we're gonna be growing is on the other side of, this side of St. Helens is kind of at maximum fill. The infill is happening on the other side of the highway. There's no police station over there, hardly any, I mean, the fire department's been looking at moving stuff to the other side of the highway just because of response times.
Well, look how close they are to Highway 30 there, and how far they are at Castor.
Oh, another excuse was the couplet posed a challenge, and Old Portland Road provided more direct access, even though this is right off of 8th Street, which provides Old Portland Road access. That's, you know,
They're both on the wrong side of town for that one argument, so that.
Right, I mean, I think their thought process is the other one was closer because they could go out the other end. But to my way of thinking,
There is
you
all.
wouldn't go out to Millard Road because that's leaving the city limits.
You're going the wrong direction to respond. To respond to these are the people that you need to respond to.
If you're going up Gable Road, it's slower going all the way around.
It's a lot of.
I've timed it with
It's a lot
my
more
husband.
miles. Yeah.
Believe me.
I went the long way around, today with the train. I went to, I went to Millard.
Yep.
I went to Millard
I did
and
that all the
took that little cut through by the state police to make it through because the yellow light at, Gable was backed clear up past Burgerville.
Well, you don't realize when you're the grid patterns like this, that Highway 30 comes closer and closer to you. You go
Right.
up 18th, then if you go farther south, it's way over there, way west now. You get down Old Portland
When I first moved here, I didn't realize that, and I was always taking Old Portland Road. And, my husband that's lived here his whole life, he goes, "What are you doing?"
Road.
We lived on Pittsburgh Road, and he's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing over there? Don't even go over there. That whole side of town just be dead to you." I go, "What do you mean it's easier?" And he goes, "There's less people, but that doesn't make it faster."
From my house in North 7th, it was like 2.5 miles by Old Portland Road and 1.8 miles to Walmart.
You don't still live at North Seventh,
No.
do you?
No, I
No.
still own it. I still
Where's your special house with the special fence?
North 7th.
That's where the fence is with the trees and the,
Yeah, don't go there now. I really trashing my son lives there. Well, they cleaned up some bushes and they haven't been hauled out yet. So.
no, are you, as long as we're like down in the weeds, have you been by OMSI in the last 10 years? That's the fence I want them to have, that with all the little colors on it.
I don't know what that is.
At OMSI, there where the light rail comes in by OMSI, they have a chain link fence, and they've woven this design in with these like little lucite things, so it looks like in the sunlight, it looks like shimmering water.
They don't have a TriMet budget.
You see the house on Pittsburgh Road that put marbles?
That's what
No,
I'm,
but they have crafts.
like,
You see the guy on Pittsburgh Road that put marbles in his wood fence?
down.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Pushed them in.
How far up Pittsburgh Road?
Actually, it's the very first house past Milton Creek. on the
Oh,
right.
really? I'll have to look, cause that's
You
not that
walk
far
the
out
walk
of my
and
way.
see it. Yeah, if you lit behind it, it would just all sparkle. It'd be cool.
Wow. I'll have to look. Take a
So,
homework.
so my house has like conifer trees, and then, like Mount Hood, and then conifer trees.
But that was your house on Seventh?
Yeah, it's still there.
Don't go look, cause your son's there now.
We can look if you want, but you can't see it real well.
Okay, meeting's adjourned, it's 10 o'clock.